is hammered. That's a fair ball. First big league hit for Pajes. 2 runs will score. Here comes Carlson. They're going to wave him around. It's a bases clearing double. And it's 5-0. Swing and a drive. Burleson unloads. Deep to right field. It's gone. Base open at second base. The pitch. He got him. A swing and a miss. And somehow Romero got out of it. The Angels ran into a huge second out. And JoJo Romero works around a double and 2 walks to preserve a 1-run Cardinal lead as we go to a crazy 9th in Anaheim.
Scratch and claw and find your way back into the ball game and then win. But that's a perfect example of that here a week ago. That's an L. The offense is doing a really nice job. 1 through 9, everyone's contributing and feeling pretty good. So we need to keep it up.
How about them Cardinals? The St. Louis Cardinals have won 3 in a row, 4-3 against Milwaukee, 10-5 and 7-6 against the LA Angels. They're scratching, they're clawing, they're finding a way to come away with some of these victories. And last night, that is exactly what they did. T-Bone, it's not always super... it's not a Picasso, to say the least, but they're finding ways to win. And I'll give them credit where it's due. That is what we said they needed to accomplish. They needed to go out there and win really all 3 games of this series against the LA Angels. And the Angels are doing everything in their power to make sure that that happens. I'm not suggesting otherwise. We've been texting back and forth during these games. I hate watching these. I hate it. The second baseman right now for the LA Angels is one of the, and this is no shot against him. I genuinely feel bad watching him right now. He's one of the worst major league players I've seen against the Cardinals in years. He's just so clearly overwhelmed by the speed of the game. How many times last night did he make the exact same play, ranging to his right, trying to flip the ball to the shortstop to get the guy as a force out at second base? And every single time it went like 5 feet to the side of the shortstop, and they didn't make the play. And a couple of those times, that guy ended up coming back around to score. It led to the Cardinals winning that game. So, anyways, that's who they're going up against right now. And you can't apologize for the team that you're playing against. That your job is to beat them. And over the last 2 days, the Cardinals have accomplished that goal. And we're critical as hell of them for not finding a way to do that against the Chicago White Sox. And basically the exact same type of game that we saw yesterday. So credit where it's due. Cardinals are starting to get the offense going a little bit, and it's looking a little better right now. So credit where it's due. They're finding ways to win.
You don't have to sound sad about it, though, okay? Like, they're playing better, okay? They're playing better. And look, I won't declare the offense back because I learned my lesson when I declared Jack back last year, and I was way wrong. So I won't do that just yet. But they are looking better, to your point. They are providing more competitive at-bats. You are seeing some glimpses of the old Paul Goldschmidt taking a 95-mile-an-hour fastball to the eyes and ripping it the other way. Like, there are some positive trends that are coming for the St. Louis Cardinals offensively. Now, where the real litmus test will be is when they come back home and see Boston, who's got one of the best
100%.
pitching staffs, and Baltimore, who's got a great pitching staff. Then we can really declare the offense back if they play well. But it is good to see some good signs. It is good to see some guys kind of coming out of ruts because, hey, they're actually making it look like they know how to hit a baseball now. And that wasn't the case prior to this. And yes, I understand the opponent is a bad opponent, and my God, the Angels suck.
They're so bad, dude. They're so bad.
I think they might be the worst team in baseball. And I thought that was going to be the White Sox and Rockies cake to have. No, this is like a 120-loss team. This is how bad the Angels are. But
they're worse than watching the White Sox. When we watched the White Sox, that was clearly a bad baseball team. But they're like a classic bad baseball team. The Angels are the bad news bears out there. They make every mistake possible. If there's a chance for them to hit a cutoff man, they will not. If there's a chance for them to turn a double play, they will not. If there's a chance for them to just play ABC baseball, they will not. They find ways to screw up the easy aspects of watching Major League Baseball.
And you know they're bad when they try a play that hasn't been done since the 80s, the suicide squeeze, and they screw that up. Like, that's how bad the Angels are.
And then the manager after the game comes out and is like, hey, that was his fault. I told him what to do. He didn't get it right. That was... Whew.
Oh, Ron Washington.
Yeah, not great.
What a human being. But look, there are better sides. 12 hits in this game. They had a bunch of hits in the game prior to that. Yeah, it feels like this could be a series that could be a building block. I'm not going to declare declare it the building block yet because you have to see it against competitive teams. But this is what the offense should look like against the LA Angels. This looks kind of like the offense you were somewhat expecting, where they had a couple of extra base hits last night. They can go station to station. For the most part, they played okay defensively last night. Sonny Gray didn't have his best stuff, but as Oli Marmol said postgame, did his best Mike Schultz impersonation, they scratched and clawed, and they found a way to win. And that's what you got to do. You had to take 2 of 3 from this series at a minimum. In fact, how bad the Angels are, this should be a sweep. Like, this is a must-win tonight. Agreed. Where they need to sweep the LA Angels because this team is that bad.
As an aside, do the Angels have the best City Connect uniforms? Watching that game last night and seeing those uniforms, I think they might be my favorite. San Diego's got some good ones. I like Milwaukee's City Connects,
like
the light
Houston's.
Blue with the yellow. I do not like Houston's.
Really?
You like those?
Yeah, the Space...
yeah, I'm not a fan.
It is, Space City or whatever they call it.
I think it depends on what you like out of the City Connects. I like the more like... Those look like they could be an alternate uniform. Like, forget being a City Connect. The Angels last night just looked like a typical, nice alternate uniform. The Space Cadet ones that they've got down in Houston are weird and wild and clearly City Connect. And that's the difference between the two. I prefer what the Angels have. I like the more subtle type of a City Connect uniform.
Where it looks like just like the Cardinals cream colored, Saturdays when they wear those at home?
Just make them look nice. Connect it somehow to the city, the way that they have with the Angels, but make it look like an actual Major League uniform instead of something that the Savannah Bananas would be wearing. Like, that's what I personally prefer. I think the Angels have a top 3 City Connect uniform.
I like Seattle's too.
Those are good.
I think Seattle's got a really good one. The Angels is kind of blah to me.
Really? You don't like them?
Yeah.
Not enough?
No.
Not weird enough?
And look.
I think the Cardinals will be very Angels-y, where it's like, okay, I could see how you went away from the typical Cardinals
suck at
uniform.
PRs currently. They're going to have like a yellow uniform that's going to be like, whoa, that is the Savannah Bananas. And they're going to play like them where they're making all kinds of weird mistakes. Like, no, I think you're giving the Cardinals way too much credit. Hell, they don't even have their baby blues yet.
Yeah, that's fanatics. Yikes. All right, so back to the game from last night. The Cardinals' offense is starting to get back on track. We got this from the text line. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. BK, I want your take on Alec Burleson. What do you think about him? Is he actually a good baseball player? Yeah, I think so. I've said this for a while, though. I've been, quote-unquote, in on Alec Burleson from the very beginning. Even when the results weren't there, you could see, okay, this is a guy who in the minor leagues led all of AAA in batting average. And I know that we have just set aside batting average as a stat that no longer matters. I disagree with that. I do think it matters. I don't think it matters as much as we used to suggest that it did. Like, it used to be the only thing that people would look at. I think that was wrong. I do think that batting average still has a place in this game. Like, for my 5-hole hitter, I'm kind of old school in this regard. It's like the only thing that I'm old school with. I think you need a guy that hits for average. I want a guy that can come up in certain situations and just whatever the situation is, he will meet that requirement. So if you've got a runner on third, less than 2 outs, I want him to hit a sac fly there. Get the guy in. It's why I loved that Albert Pujols was your 5-hole hitter a lot of the time when he was here for his final year here in St. Louis. Because he would do all of those things, like the right thing that the situation calls for. Alec Burleson is one of those guys, in my opinion, where he can't hit for average. He can't hit for slug. He's not going to be a big on-base percentage guy because he just doesn't take very many pitches. He's a super aggressive hitter. But I like the way that he plays. He's not a great defender, but he's fine. I think he's capable in the outfield. I think it could be your starting first baseman next year. I think he does a pretty good job over there, honestly. So is Alec Burleson a great baseball player? No, I don't think his ceiling is all that high with a guy like Burleson. But I think every contending team needs one of those guys. A guy that can just come in, hit 270 to 280 for you, finishes the year with like 15 to 20 home runs consistently. It's just a really nice baseball player that ends up, especially while he's on this rookie deal, outperforming what you're paying him to do. So, yeah, I think Alec Burleson's really good. And over the last 10 games, he has an OPS over 1,000. So I like what you're getting out of Alec Burleson right now. I think he's been a really good player for you.
Yeah, I think he's, at least for the current time being, solidified himself as a starter. Now, where that is, I don't really care. DH him, put him in the outfield. I think his outfield defense looks more improved this year, too. I think he's already has 3 outfield assists this season, so he's playing well defensively out there, and he can play him at first to give Goldie a day off. But he is a guy to your point, I don't think he'll ever be great, but he's a really good baseball player, a guy that can hit near the bottom of the order, that's going to hit for some average, or could be in that 5 spot, depending on how your offense is going as a whole, because he's got such great bat-to-ball skills. And I do think you need a couple of those guys in your lineup, because he's been below league average in his strikeout percentage all 3 years that he's been up. Like, he had some bad luck, and now you're starting to see it break his way, and he hits the ball hard, too. That's the other thing, is it's not like you can look at his Baseball Savant page and be like, wow, that's a lot of blue. He hits the ball fairly hard when he does make contact. So
he's just an above-league average hitter in every possible way.
Yeah, I love him. I think he's a perfect, 5-6 hole hitter, and at this point for the St. Louis Cardinals, he's become a guy that has to start. Like, lefty, righty, I don't care. He needs to be in the lineup because the Cardinals don't have their bats going, so Burley has to be in. Like, they're getting to the point where he should be their starting left fielder right now. And I know that they don't want to give up offense or defense for offense. I think he's like a league average defender out there in left, and I think that's what Donovan is. So I think you can make the case for them to put him in left field and move Donovan into second base and bench Gorman based on the way that he has played.
Yeah, Gorman's the one that you got to take out of the lineup right now. He's just not hitting well enough. And if you're going to go this way, you can have Donovan as your DH occasionally as well. You can find ways to get these guys all into the lineup. By the way, Goldie doesn't deserve to play every day right now. So if you want to do a couple of days a week where you've got Brendan Donovan as your starting first baseman, cool. Give a couple of days off a week to Goldie while he's trying to work through some things. Those are going to be work days for him pregame. I'm fine with that. Nobody is a sacred cow at this point. If you need to get guys out of the lineup because you're searching for production, that's what you got to do. Yesterday, you had Mason Wynn batting leadoff. They would have never done that in the first month of the season. But you do it because he's your best option right now against a left-handed pitcher. You know who else they've had as a leadoff lately? Matt Carpenter. That wasn't the plan going into the season, but he's your best option right now, batting leadoff against a right-handed starter. So get weird with it, dude. Whatever the best way for you to go to get that production that you're so badly craving right now is, go ahead and do it. And I think Oli Marmol's done a pretty good job of that lately. The Cardinals are 18-24. This is no great shakes or anything, but the National League is leaving this thing wide open, dude. The National League is terrible this year outside of 4 teams. Right now, the tie for the last wild card is between the Padres and the Nationals, both of whom are under 500. The St. Louis Cardinals, the team that you've been watching all year long, is 2.5 games out of the wild card right now.
Yes.
Think about that for a second. The Cardinals, which we all agree, as of 2 days ago, people wanted everybody fired, and I think the vast majority of our listening audience still feels that way.
I'm sticking to that.
They have been outscored by 45 runs on the season, and they are 2.5 games out of the wild card. Now, there's 7 teams in front of them for that spot, but the Padres, Nationals, Diamondbacks, Mets, Pirates, Giants, and Reds are all in that range of 2.5 games back up until the final wildcard spot. This division, this league, has not put you 6 feet under yet. And I don't know how or why that's happened, but given the circumstances within the National League, the Cardinals are very much still alive. It feels absurd to say that because it doesn't feel that way when you watch them on a night in, night out basis, but they've given themselves that opportunity based on their ability to win the first 2 games of this series against the Angels. They need to get the sweep tonight. Go out there. You got Lynn on the mound. This team's terrible. Take care of business, and then we can really start evaluating them again. I can't learn much of anything against the Angels. This team's too bad to be able to do that against. Boston, yeah, we can learn if this recent uptick in offense is real against that pitching staff. Baltimore, same thing. Chicago, same thing. And then you should go do against the Reds, which you've done right now against the LA Angels, because that's another terrible baseball team right now. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex is off today. He'll be back in tomorrow, and then he's off again on Friday here on BK and Ferrario. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll get into some NFL quick hitters, but next, you guys aren't going to like me for this. Oli Marmol is pressing all of the right buttons right now, and we'll tell you how coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
what it showed was like, hey, this is your game. Win it, but we're going to win it or lose it right here with you. That was just a moment where it was like, hey, I know you might not be super happy with kind of what's went on in the last couple innings, but you need to bear down right here and just get one guy and give ourselves a chance. You talk about pitching to win the game. This is a moment where you can just let all the other stuff go behind you and just pitch to win the game right here where you are in this moment.
So that's what it sounded like last night after the game. Sonny Gray discussing what it meant to him to have the opportunity to stick in there one final batter to be able to get through that one. He had just walked the 9-hole hitter, loaded the bases, brings up the top of the order. 4th time seeing the leadoff hitter. Typically, T-Bone, that is a spot where a new school manager, no doubt about it, is taking out his starting pitcher. Instead, Oli Marmol leaves Sonny Gray in the game last night, and I think part of this is your alternative, right? It's not just about the math of, okay, starter should not see a guy 4th time through the order. It's also, okay, what am I going to instead? I texted you immediately upon hearing on the broadcast that John King was up in the bullpen to come into the game. I texted you, said, they're really going to go to John King here? Like, I was furious about it. And I don't get all hot and bothered under the collar very often when it comes to these kinds of decisions. This one would have legitimately made me mad because you can't go to John King in that spot. That can't be the answer. And it wasn't. They decided to leave Sonny Gray into the game and allow him, hey, this game is yours. We're going to win or lose based on whether our ace can get out of this spot right now. And T-Bone, we had a lot of questions in the offseason about how Oli Marmol would handle these kinds of situations with the older, veteran, respected pitchers. Their entire value is getting through innings and getting through moments like that. Well, we've seen it with Lance Lynn. They've left him in and said, hey, you got yourself into this mess. We believe you're going to find a way to get yourself out of it. And more often than not, he has this year. We've seen it with Kyle Gibson. There are times when that dude has a lot of traffic on the bases, and guess what? He finds a way to get through it. Now, Miles Michaelis hasn't had that same amount of success. And you know who hasn't been getting as deep into games this year? And Oli, even with the pitch count, has said, you know what? Quick hook here. We're going to get you out of this game because we don't trust you to get out of this spot. He's done a good job of getting him out of those situations. And last night, he did it again with Sonny Gray, deciding to get him out. But that's not the only thing he's done. He's also shaking up the batting order. He went to Matt Carpenter a couple of days ago to lead off because clearly they had no better options. They decided to go with Mason Wynn last night against a left-handed starter. Thought that was a really smart thing to do. They're getting more opportunities for Alec Burleson. T-Bone, I know nobody wants to hear it, and everybody wanted Oli Marmol fired. I think Oli's pressing the right buttons right now. Now, I don't know if it's going to work. They're playing the worst team in baseball right now, in my opinion, so it's easier to press the right buttons and see them come through against a team like this. Would you have been able to get through 2 days ago with that pitching staff against, I don't know, the Boston Red Sox? No, probably not. Would you have been able to get through that game last night, bridging it the way that they had to with Fernandez and John King to get to the back end of your pen? No, probably not. But this is the task at hand, and right now, I think Oli Marmol's doing a good job given what the circumstances are.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he's done a good job, and again, it comes down to what I feel like we've been saying is the reason that you're not seeing a better record for the Cardinals is because they've got Goldie Arenado not playing well. It's not on Oli Marmol, and there's nothing he's going to do to get those guys going. He's just sticking with them in that 3-4 spot and hoping that at some point it finally all clicks together for him. But I agree with you. I like what he's done with Mason Wynn and Matt Carpenter now at the top of the order. I find it interesting what they're doing with Nootbaar in the 2 spot against right-handed pitching, and now Donovan with Nootbaar not in the game last night. They put him there against a lefty, so they must have liked something that they were seeing from Brendan Donovan, who I think's looking a little better. But I loved what he did with Sonny Gray last night because when King started to throw in the bullpen, I thought to myself, okay, I can see where you get to a spot to where you decide you need to go to him, but if you're telling me with Chenal, who's their first baseman, who has a 639 OPS, who do I think has a better shot at getting him out? A guy with swing and miss and Sonny Gray and seeing him a 4th time, or John King? My answer is going to be Sonny Gray. I don't care what his pitch count is. It could have been 120, and I would have felt that way. Yep. So I love the fact that he went that route, and then they can bridge it together with King and Fernandez in that 7th inning. Where I think it would have been different is if you had Kittredge available. If Kittredge is available in that game, you go to JoJo Romero, and Sonny Gray's not seeing that. But because he pitched 3 days in a row, I love the fact that you're going to trust your ace. This is what an ace does. An ace is a guy that you can trust, that can take the ball and go 6 innings, even if it wasn't his best stuff. And it was not Sonny Gray's Picasso last night. 8 hits, 5 earned runs, 2 walks. He didn't have his best stuff. And the Angels started to hit him hard that 3rd time through the order. but that's the guy. You live and you die with your ace. So that game was on his shoulders, and I love the fact that Oli Marmol said, we're going to stick with him. And because you didn't have your top left-handed option available, it's the right call. And I loved every second of it. I've always said I love when he goes out to the mound and has a conversation with the guys and then opts to stick with them. I love the fact that wasn't even the one that went out there. So Gray doesn't even get in the back of his mind of, okay, they're going to go to the bullpen. I loved everything about the move last night to keep Sonny Gray in for that last batter.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You can always check us out on YouTube as well. YouTube.com/101ESPN-STL. That's where the graveyard chat is off and running today as well. From the 573. Guys, I agree on Ollie. He's making some good decisions lately. Also, really liked to see him get tossed the other day. It was encouraging to watch. I like seeing the fire. I think that's where we're at right now with Oli Marmol. I think he's in the bleep it mode, where he's like, hey, there's a decent chance I'm going to get fired. If that's going to be the case, I'm going to just manage the way that I would want to manage. I'm going to go out there and make the decisions that I would make if it all meant nothing. And right now, I think you're seeing some of that. The other day, Ben Fredrickson had this on Twitter. He said that during batting practice, he noticed that the volume on the music was really high. And he found out that that was apparently at the request of Oli Marmol. He's just out there trying to find things that can shake things up. I heard his interview on Sunday on the Cardinals radio network. He does it every week. And they asked him about, hey, you know, is it time for you to try with Paul Goldschmidt to just get him away, just not work? He's like, listen, we don't broadcast these things, but we've tried that. He's like, I know that everybody's got ideas of how you can fix Goldie right now. We've tried basically everything. And he's like, I think that maybe eventually we're going to find something that sticks, but so far we haven't. But yeah, to answer your question directly, Ollie said, we have tried not having him do anything before games. We've tried pretty much everything. So at this point, I don't think it's on Ollie. Now, he may get fired for the team's lack of performance because that's the job. Sometimes when your team doesn't perform, Ron Washington's probably going to get fired. I don't think it's his fault that the LA Angels are bad, but that's the way that this works. When you're a manager, when you're a coach in professional sports, if your team doesn't perform, whether your fault or the front office's, you get fired. But I think Oli Marmol, generally speaking, has done a pretty good job. And one of the decisions that he made last night, T-Bone, and I think this is something that we're going to see moving forward, and I mentioned it to you last night as well. Pedro Pages has now caught each of the last two starts that we've seen from Sonny Gray. We have not seen Ivan Herrera catch a game for Sonny Gray since Sonny's first start of the season in a Cardinals uniform. And I'm going to guess that that is not by mistake. So I wanted to hear from Oli Marmol after the game last night, especially after Pages had a really good start, both behind the plate and with the bases clearing double, something they've desperately been needing with the bases loaded. Here was Oli Marmol after the game last night talking about what he saw from his young catcher.
Pages did an incredible job. I mean, the base hit, first of all, the double there was fun to see. The dugout loved that one. But navigating that lineup, the different arms we used today, I mean, he blocked a ton and some really tough ones too in key moments. But he did an absolutely phenomenal job tonight.
T-Bone, I think Pedro Pages has done a really good job in acquitting himself well to this Cardinals fan base. It's early. I don't want to get out over our skis. We did this early on with Ivan Herrera, where we were like, oh, man, this guy's amazing. Look at him hit. And then we've seen, there's some holes for a young catcher. What are you seeing right now out of Pages, and what do you think it could mean for the Cardinals moving forward?
What I'm seeing is a catcher that is probably better in terms of blocking behind the plate. I do think he's better than Herrera currently is at that. And I wonder if they view that he can control the running game better. Because if I'm not mistaken, Herrera's not caught anybody stealing. Now, look, that's not all on the catcher. Like, there is the pitcher that's got to hold him.
I could be wrong on that.
But, well, it's still not a good number if we're going to go 0 or 1. But I think I wonder if they feel like he's better at controlling the running game. And I think right now he is the de facto catcher for Sonny Gray. And I think if he continues to play well in those starts with Sonny Gray, I think what you're going to see is they're going to move even closer to that 50-50 split to where they may just alternate those guys. And maybe Pages with Sonny Gray and like Matthew Liberatore, and then maybe they split with like Miles Michaelis. And then you see Herrera catch Lynn and Gibson in the split with Michaelis, because I do think he's better behind the plate in terms of blocking. I think framing's probably similar from what I've seen, but he does look like a major league catcher in terms of his defensive game. And that's what they hyped him up to be was, hey, he's going to be a defensive first catcher. His bat's probably not ready for the big leagues. And I think that holds true. And I think they're going to try and get this to a 50-50 split just because of the nature of what is catching in the major leagues. There was a great piece on The Athletic today about the bruises that catchers go through. You need to split this 50-50, and that's what they wanted to
last
do.
Night, once again, getting hit with the catcher's interference.
He almost broke his hand, yeah.
By the way, 0 for 21, Ivan Herrera is so far this year on catching.
And some of those probably are on the pitcher. Not all of them, though.
He's played in 21 games, and he's allowed 21 stolen bases. That's not what you want, to put it mildly. Pedro Pages is 1 for 3 on catching would-be stealers, so he's been much better in that regard. This is what you need. You needed somebody to be able to lighten the load for Ivan Herrera behind the plate. And if that means catching 2 out of every 5 days, that's something that this team could really use right now. He typically plays 6 games a week, so if you get 2 of those, maybe 3 from Pedro Pages, you're feeling pretty good about it. And my assumption would be at least 1 of those will be with Sonny Gray on the mound. I wonder if part of that is because Sonny likes to call his own game. I wonder if you'll see some of this with Miles Michaelis as well, because Michaelis does some of that. I think Gibson has played with that as well. Those are probably the 3 guys that you could see most with Pedro Pages behind the plate. And I wonder if part of this is also the breaking balls. Like, do you want him back there with Sonny Gray and maybe Kyle Gibson because they've got the sweepers that potentially will lead to more wild pitches, and you don't want Ivan Herrera behind the plate for that.
And that would make sense because you got Lynn with fastballs, Michaelis with no real breaking pitch at all that doesn't get clobbered, and then like the bullpen game in Liberatore. Like, I don't know if that plays any impact to it. And I did find... So, like, we've been talking about, I said, like, Herrera's not catching guys, so I was curious, like, okay, what does his baseball savant page look like? And, look, I think defensive metrics are,
especially with the small of a sample size.
Yeah, fragile at best. But in terms of, like, blocks above average, 38th percentile, framing, 51st percentile, pop time, 27th percentile. So the
Below
metrics,
average.
They basically tell you he was like Wilson Contreras from last year. And if that's the case, and Pedro Pages is definitely a major league ready defensive catcher, I can see how the Cardinals say, hey, for those breaking ball pitchers, to your point, we've got to start Pages. And if our offense, look, we're not going to win or lose based on what Pages does in the 9-hole. Honestly, you're probably not going to win or lose depending on what Herrera does wherever he's sitting in the lineup. It comes down to those big bats in the top 5. So I think, you try and get to this 50-50 split.
Somebody on the text line, last thing on this, said, guys, are you worried at all about Sonny Gray, what we've seen from him in his most recent 2 starts? It hasn't looked quite the same as it did early on. I'm not. The last 2 starts, if this is the quote-unquote downside from Sonny Gray, feeling pretty good about the guy that you ended up signing this offseason. He's still at a 3.0 ERA right now. He was always going to have some regression that was likely to come his way. And I think the last couple of starts, he just hasn't had his best stuff. He's gone out there, and for whatever reason, the start before this was pretty easily explainable. And I thought it was really interesting to hear Jim Edmonds talk about this on the broadcast last night. He said Sonny Gray is like an over-preparer. He wants to get out there and really dive into all of the scouting reports for the lineup that he's about to see. And he didn't really have the opportunity to do that because of the rain out the day before against the Mets that ended up leading him into that Milwaukee series. And so he felt underprepared going into that one. Now, don't latch on to that and be like, oh, Sonny Gray needs to be like, every other start that he's going to have this year, for the most part, he's going to have the opportunity to do exactly what we were talking about. But that explains why he struggled against Milwaukee pretty well. Also, Milwaukee just has been a good lineup this year. I thought yesterday was just kind of a weird start. It all kind of unraveled for him, and third time through, sometimes that happens. I'm not super concerned about it at all.
Almost like the third time through the order is a real thing. Who
Coming
knew?
up in 15 minutes, questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. NFL quick hitters coming up next, including the team that's going to be on Hard Knocks this year and why T-Bone and I are just not excited about it. Next year on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals eked out a win last night as they held on to win 7-6 after blowing a 5-run lead. They've won 3 in a row. They look to win 4 in a row tonight as Lance Lynn takes the mound in the series finale against the Angels. First pitch will be at 8:07 in Los Angeles. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, we will have Stars and Avalanche. Game 5 tonight between those two teams. Pregame will be at 6:30. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Let's dive into some NFL quick hitters alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex out today. He'll be back in tomorrow and then out again on Friday. T-Bone, let's start with the big announcement from earlier today. The NFL has announced that it will be the New York Giants joining forces with the Hard Knocks series. This will be called the Offseason with the New York Giants. It's a brand new iteration of the Hard Knocks series. It's going to document the NFL offseason, like the entirety of the offseason, apparently. I don't know exactly how this is going to work or how long it will take place. This is separate, apparently, from the typical Hard Knocks entity that will be looking into like the preseason and training camp and all of that. I think they're still doing that with a different team than what was announced today. This is going to be following the New York Giants. What is your level of interest in this particular series, T-Bone?
Like a 2 on a scale of 10. Like, I love the concept of following an NFL team throughout the offseason. We settled on the G-Men, though. They stink. Their draft was like the most exciting part of like, oh, are they going to take a quarterback? Oh, they're clearly trying to trade up. Their offseason wasn't that exciting. Like, I don't remember what they did. I think they brought in Drew Lock.
Yeah.
And that's like it. Like, if you wanted a fun offseason team, go follow somebody like the Chicago Bears, who had the number 1 pick. The Falcons is another good one. Or the Houston Texans, who had a really good offseason. Or Minnesota and what they were trying to do, you know? Even though they let Kirk Cousins walk, it was kind of unknown what they were going to do. But the Giants, to me, is like the most boring team that you could possibly have picked to have this for the first time for an offseason Hard Knocks edition of this.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get why this... I think, if I had to guess, let me revert back. Take 2. I think the reason why they're doing this is because it's New York. And so you're going to have this massive audience that is going to follow. Because if you're a Giants fan, you're going to be locked in, right? They just did that last year with the Jets on Hard Knocks.
I don't care. Let's do it again.
That would be my assumption, is they just wanted the New York audience as a part of this. There are 3 teams that are eligible for the actual Hard Knocks series for this fall. It's Chicago, New Orleans, and Denver. And when I say eligible, I mean the 3 teams that the NFL can force into doing Hard Knocks as a preseason version. And nobody wants to do it anymore. Nobody wants to be a part of it. So it's probably going to be one of those 3 teams, New Orleans, Chicago, or Denver, because there's rules that are in place. No first-year head coach participating in if you're not participating in the in-season thing for the first time. And then you can't have appeared on Hard Knocks in the past 8 years. So those are the 3 teams that don't fit any of that criteria. I think Chicago should be the team that you clearly are targeting for that version of Hard Knocks. And then you're going to have, I think it's like 4 teams that are taking place during the season this year. They're kind of switching it up the way that they've done it. They're doing like a whole division,
if I remember correctly.
So you got a bunch of different things that are going to be taking place. I just think they whiffed on who they're going with here. The Giants didn't have an interesting offseason.
Yeah.
The only intrigue was, do you move on from Daniel Jones? And my guess is the way that they're going to film this, they're going to make sure you know that they were never going to be moving on from Daniel Jones. You know what?
If they do like the whole, like what the Patriots did and like threw Belichick under the bus, and they do this for the offseason of the Giants, and you can see them trying to move on from Daniel Jones, you know what? I changed my complete answer. 10 out of 10, they nailed this decision. But you're right, they're not going to do that.
All right, let's get into some more things from NFL quick hitters. T-Bone, there's a piece up right now from ESPN.com on the quarterback questions heading into the 2024 season. I want to go through a few of these. They've got them for basically every team across the league. Grant, if you got any thoughts, feel free to throw them in here. Their big question for the Buffalo Bills: will Josh Allen still be elite without Stephon Diggs? We talked about this a bit yesterday. How do you feel about Josh Allen heading into this season? People, I'm sure, that are getting ready for fantasy drafts this summer will also be curious on that regard.
I still think he can be a elite quarterback. but I don't think he can make up for the lack of star talent on the wide receiver room. So, I think the Bills, for example, are not a below 500 team this year. I think they can still win 9 games because we've seen Josh Allen single-handedly win them football games. I don't think, though, that he can prop up that wide receiver room to make them win the AFC East and be like an 11-win team, 12-win team, because he does turn the ball over a little bit too much. He's still going to be a top 10 quarterback, though, in the NFL in my mind. That doesn't change that Diggs is out of the wide receiver room.
Yeah, I'm with you. I do think there's going to be a step back, though. I think the only players that whenever you lose a star like that can really stay where they are the top elite ones, like Patrick Mahomes, for example. Josh Allen's not there. I think he's a very good quarterback. I don't think he's in that elite category, though. So I think there's going to be a step back, but I don't think he's going to look terrible by any means.
I guess maybe this is where we probably differ a little bit is, do you call top 10 an elite quarterback? Because I would. So what I'm saying is I think he goes from top 5 to top 10 is where I think he falls off a little bit. Yeah.
I don't think a third of the league is elite.
I think he's top 5 still.
You do?
I would still have him in that criteria, yeah. I mean, who else am I taking above him? I'll take Patrick Mahomes. I think C.J. Stroud you can make a pretty good case for.
Burrow, if he has a bounce back, would be there.
Who else are you taking?
Maybe Justin Herbert if he has a bounce back.
Ooh, I'm not going there.
And that's
I
a
need
tough
to see the
one.
Production.
But for sure, I agree with that.
I think you can make a case for Lamar. I mean, 2-time MVP,
Yeah.
it's hard for me to just set him aside. But even if I'm going there, if we're just even throwing Justin Herbert in, we're at 6 now. For where we're having with Josh Allen, I would consider that still to be an elite level quarterback. So I think the production will go down a bit in terms of the passing game this year. I still think he's going to have big time production and he'll be right in the conversation. If they end up going 11-6, 12-5, we're going to be talking about Josh Allen by the end of the year as being an MVP candidate because of what he does not have around him this year. All right, next thing up here as we go through some NFL quick hitters. Their question for the Texans: have the Texans given C.J. Stroud enough around him to be a legitimate MVP candidate this season and to carry the team deep into the playoffs in this upcoming postseason? They added Stephon Diggs. They added Joe Mixon. They've got Danielle Hunter on the defense now. T-Bone, do you think C.J. Stroud has enough around him to be a legitimate MVP candidate this year?
I think so. I think he's got the weapons around him now. We'll see what Tank Dell looks like coming off of a major injury. If he gets back to his level of play and you add in Stephon Diggs and you kind of improve that running back room, and look, I think Mixon's he's past his prime, no doubt about it, but I think he's better than what they had a year ago, and you add in the piece that you mentioned in Hunter on the defensive end, yeah, they should be a team to where he should be able to prop up that room with him and be an MVP caliber player. And if not, then we're going to have the question of, hey, was the rookie year, I don't want to call it a fluke, but was it kind of overhype of, hey, this is a top 10 quarterback, but can he get his way into the top 5? That's what this year will really tell you about C.J. Stroud.
Well, and seeing what he was able to do last year with a team that wasn't bad around him, but maybe didn't have the superstars that they have now at this offseason, yeah, I think he's going to take a big step this year as well. I mean, that was his rookie season. Yep. What's it going to look like in his sophomore season? You can call it the sophomore slump, but I think that C.J. Stroud is going to take a step forward, not a step back.
So the only players in the NFL right now with better odds, shorter odds, to win the MVP in 2024 than C.J. Stroud are Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. He's third on that list right now, regardless of which sports book you look at. He's at 10-1. I don't think those are good enough odds for me to bet on it, but I think it speaks to where we all are on C.J. Stroud right now. He's got better odds right now than Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson or Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, etc. Yeah, I think he has every bit enough around him to win the MVP this upcoming year. I think they messed up, the NFL did, by not putting C.J. Stroud on opening night against the Chiefs. I think that should have been the opener for the Chiefs. I think it would be a great way to announce the presence of the 2024 season, because C.J. Stroud, to me, is the next guy that is going to be in line to try to take Patrick Mahomes down off of that mantle as the team in the AFC heading into this season. We've seen the Bills have that opportunity. We saw the Bengals actually do it in the postseason. We've seen the Ravens try to accomplish that. I think the Texans are the next one that are going to try to do that for the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, last thing here. I want to go through, in your guys' mind, who the best long shot MVP quarterback is that you would bet on heading into this season. I'm going to read you a few of these. Write down who you think would be the best long shot bet. So I'm talking 20-1 odds or worse, okay? Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy, Trevor Lawrence. They're all at 20-1 right now. Matthew Stafford is at 25-1 along with Tua Tagovailoa and Aaron Rodgers. Anthony Richardson is at 30-1. Jared Goff at 35-1. Kirk Cousins at 40-1. And then you've got Kyler Murray at 50-1 with Caleb Williams. I'll throw one more in here at 75-1. For you guys, if you were placing money on one of those guys, who would you be placing money on today as your long shot MVP candidate right now among the quarterbacks?
Oh, man. So Tua and Brock Purdy were ones that caught my mind, but they got kind of hurt by the weapons around them this past year, so I assume that that's probably going to be the case again. I think I would go with, he should be in this conversation, but for some reason he's not. I think I might go Jared Goff. Whew. To where if Goff has another really good year, I could see where he ends up getting significant votes. Again, I think he falls in that conversation, but for some reason I feel like he falls... Because he played so well last year and you've got the whole Detroit scene chanting, Goff, 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 everybody seems to forget, like, this guy's not good when he doesn't have weapons around him. So I think Goff's the guy that I would put into this conversation of those odds. Rodgers is another very interesting one to where I could totally see him being one of those stories where he plays super well coming off the Achilles tear and people go for him. But I think I would go with Jared Goff. That'd be my number one choice there.
For me, Hurts was one that popped off, probably just because of the resume, and he's been in the conversation before. But the hang-up for me with him is, losing Jason Kelce this season. Who knows what that offensive line is going to look like replacing him. So that might be a little bit more difficult for him. But for me, it's Tua. He's been in the conversation multiple times. He has the weapons. Sort of the next step for him is getting there. Because, like I said, he's been in the conversation. So to take that next step, he has to get there. And with how highly powered that offense is, I think Tua could be the one that I would pick out of this one.
All right, I'm going with a long shot that I really like. Anthony Richardson, 30-1.
Wow.
I kind of thought you might go with him.
And the reason why is because I think he has a chance to put up special numbers. And I saw this stat the other day. I think it's really interesting. 15 straight quarterbacks have won the MVP. They've done so by winning 11 or more games. If you don't win at least 11 games as a quarterback, you're basically ineligible for this award. So if you think a team is going to win like 10 games, just write them off. Not a chance that their quarterback can win this award.
I'm writing off Mahomes.
They also have all had, each of the last 15 quarterbacks that won this award, a preseason win total of at least 8.5. So if you've got a team that is expected to go below 500 to start out the season, they are also essentially ineligible to win this award. People believe that the Colts could be pretty decent this year. I don't think anybody's picking them to like win the Super Bowl or anything, but people think they could be pretty good because they were decent last year with a worse quarterback at the helm for the majority of the season. Anthony Richardson could put up numbers similar to Cam Newton, and it should not surprise anybody. Guess who won the award about 10 years ago now? Cam Newton did. I think Anthony Richardson could run for like 10 touchdowns, throw for 30, throw for 3,500 yards, and run for 800. And that's probably just about what he would need to do if the team's good enough to win the MVP this year.
Well, and I think one other thing he has to do, too, and he has a good opportunity to do it because of the head-to-head matchup in the division, is outshine one of the favorites in C.J. Stroud.
Yeah.
If he can outshine him head-to-head, and if the Colts can win that division, all of a sudden he jumps C.J. Stroud in there. He's in that conversation then.
Yeah, and I do like the pick because I do love the ceiling of Anthony Richardson. He showed the flashes last year.
The floor's really low.
Yeah, but and this is where you and I have differed ever since we started working together. You look at the ceiling, I look at the floor, and I see that he's dealt with injuries in year one, and it concerns me to where I wouldn't put money on him as MVP just because I saw that he couldn't stay healthy last year. Why should I believe he can this year?
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That's Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Questions and answers coming up next.
got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's Questions and Answers.
Presented by Window World St. Louis.com. Simply the best for less.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Let's get to some of these from the text line. You can always get them in on YouTube as well, at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. That's where the graveyard chat is off and running today. From the 314, guys, could you see Mason Wynn becoming the Cardinals' leadoff hitter for the next 10 seasons?
Okay, so it's going to sound weird that I say no, but hear me out. I don't know if he has, it's hard to say this with 12 walks, but I don't know if he has as good an eye as Brendan Donovan or Lars Nootbaar for a leadoff hitter. To me, he is more of a slap-happy hitter, which is fine, but I don't know if that's a guy you put at the top of the order because his on-base is going to be heavily carried by his batting average. So there's going to be seasons where he hits into bad luck and it's going to drag down the on-base, unlike... And the reason I said it's going to be weird for me to say no is because Donovan's struggling and Nootbaar is struggling. Yep. But with those guys, if they end up getting back to their profile, they can carry their on-base percentage without hitting for average because they do such a good job of drawing walks.
Yeah, I think as you're looking around the league right now, just trying to find the comparison for him, it would be, and I don't think he is this player, but his comparison would be like a Luis Arraez type of hitter at the top of the order. And I don't know that that's going to be ultimately who he is. I think you're more likely to see Brendan Donovan and or Lars Nootbaar as your long-term answer at the top of the order. Those are guys that profile that way. Now, against left-handed pitching, could he be that guy? Absolutely. I could see that for sure because you're getting worse production, generally speaking, out of Donovan and Nootbaar against a lefty, and you'd expect a little bit more out of a Mason Wynn in that regard. So I could see him getting opportunities over the next 10 years as your leadoff hitter, but as your primary guy that's getting the most at-bats against at the top of the order, no, I don't personally see that. I hope he does. I think he profiles well as that guy if he can get that on-base percentage up. All right, from the 314, guys, besides football, do you play any other fantasy sports? I think fantasy baseball is very underrated and is a lot of fun to play. T-Bone's a fantasy baseball guy. I very much am not.
Yeah, I enjoy playing fantasy baseball. I do a lot of like best ball stuff for a season just because baseball, I don't like doing season-long ones where you have to constantly be changing through your lineup, so I would prefer to do more best ball style for baseball. But yeah, I really enjoy doing fantasy baseball. We were just talking about that during the break. It's a sad moment for T-Bone. One of his teams is going to be eliminated through the tournament, but I enjoy fantasy baseball. I'd say baseball's the only one I do outside of football.
Yeah, I'm not a fantasy guy in any other sport other than football. I love fantasy football. I play it a lot, too much. I do best ball. I do daily fantasy during the season on DraftKings and on FanDuel. I do a season-long league that we do with the station. I have another one with some of the buddies that I have from college. Like I play a lot of fantasy football, and I do not play any other fantasy sports. I just don't get into it. The other thing is, for other sports, the thing that football has going for it is the perfect setup for fantasy. You have Sunday games, you have waivers on Tuesdays, you have trades throughout the week, and then you set your lineup by Thursday. It's perfect. Whereas other sports, they play almost every day. Like you've got somebody that is playing every single night. It's too much for me. I don't think it's set up the same way for success as football is. So that's why. I think fantasy, the one thing that I think has been underutilized is fantasy college football. I do wonder if eventually we get to a place where that ends up kind of spiking as well.
Don't you worry, we'll get there.
All right, from the 314, guys, have you heard about the possibility that NBC could get the rights to the NBA over Turner Sports? And how do you feel about the possibility of witnessing the end of one of the greatest sports shows we've ever seen on television with Inside the NBA? Not only do I think that is potentially going to happen, I think it is likely to happen. I think NBC will get the rights over Turner Sports. And the crazy thing is, it sounds like that could be the end of TNT. Like, Turner, as it currently exists, very well may be going into bankruptcy if they lose the NBA. And based upon the prices that are currently being thrown around, this is not my opinion, this is just based on the reporting that's out there, I don't know that Turner can afford to pay the price that is going to go for the NBA. So they're in this tough spot of, if they don't have the NBA, they may no longer exist. But if they do have the NBA, they may not be able to pay for the fees that exist within having the NBA. So essentially, they're done. It's game over for Turner. And if that happens, yeah, you're going to see the end of Inside the NBA. And that sucks, dude. It's the greatest sports show that we currently have going. I will be fascinated to see what that means for Charles Barkley, because he will become a free agent. He's got an out clause in his contract, according to reports, that will allow him to seek out other opportunities. Does that mean he's going to go to ESPN? Like, are we going to see him on First Take with Stephen A. Smith? Is that the future of Charles Barkley? I probably. And that'll be interesting to see, but it sucks because Turner does the best of any of the major outlets at just letting their talent go out there and do a show. Yeah. It's the same thing for hockey. Their pre-post and intermission show is outstanding. It's because they just let those guys be themselves. ESPN has had a really hard time with that over the years.
Yeah, it is going to be sad to see that come to an end, because you can just constantly find great clips from those guys because they do such a great job. And I just don't know if it's going to, they can't recreate that, because you're right, all these other networks, they don't let them be as loose with it as they are on Inside the NBA, where you've got them like sprinting to the board, Shaq being thrown into like a Christmas tree. Like, no other network does that. So it's going to be really hard for them to recreate it. Yeah, exactly. And that's what it would feel like if like NBC tries it when they have the rights. So it does suck that it is going to come to an end, because like I'm not even the biggest fan of the NBA, but when I see those clips pop up on YouTube, they are must watch because they are just funny as can be.
You could just watch that show without having watched any of the game, and it would still be an enjoyable watch. Somebody else on the text line says College Game Day is also a very strong argument for one of the best sports shows. Absolutely. College Game Day is fantastic, and it has been for 20 plus years. I would still take Inside the NBA over College Game Day personally. And that's to suggest, like, I prefer college football and NBA are up there for me, both of those. But if you're just like setting aside the sport in which they cover, I think Inside the NBA is as good as it comes. All right, 15 minutes or so. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You give us two scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely. But coming up next, I was listening to something on the morning show earlier today. Randy Carricker mentioned something about Thompson and Liberatore and how he doesn't want them to become what this player has become. I'll tell you why I don't think there's any chance of that next year on 101 ESPN. All right, so we're seeing Matthew Liberatore as a starter once again. The early returns are not particularly encouraging. I don't think this is necessarily his fault, T-Bone. He's in a really tough spot right now. He came into the season preparing to be a reliever, and he's done an excellent job in that capacity. When they have called on him to be just a true bullpen arm, basically come in the Andrew Miller role, he's been great in that regard. He's excellent against left-handed hitters. That should be his role for this year. Just allow him to succeed in that way. But they have no depth in their rotation down in AAA right now. All of them are unbelievably young. I just put out some stats yesterday on just how young the Cardinals' AAA rotation is, the youngest at that level. And so they're trying to find a way to have some success at the major league level with their rotation, and they've decided to turn to Liberatore again. So earlier today, I was listening to the morning show, and they brought up Zach Thompson and Liberatore and what they hope this doesn't become. Here's Randy Carrick earlier today.
It seems to me that the Cardinals need to find out what Thompson and Liberatore are before they get to a point where the guys wind up being like Jordan Hicks, who has turned into an unmitigated success with the Giants. They need to just fish or cut bait with those two in regards to what their roles are going to be. I hope that what has happened with Jordan Hicks doesn't happen with Matthew Liberatore, that he winds up in another spot where they say, we can fix him as a starter, and all of a sudden he turns into a somewhat dominant starter.
So that could happen, I suppose. I think they're totally different situations, though, Tanner. Jordan Hicks was a starter down in the minor leagues, and the Cardinals said, holy hell, look at that velocity. We need to put that at the back end of our bullpen right now. And so for the first 4 years of him being at the big league level, this dude was a closer. This guy was a fire-breathing dragon coming at the back end of your bullpen, and that was the way that they utilized him. And then bang, early on in the 2022 season, Cardinals are like, oh, God, we have no other starters available to us. Let's see if this could work. Let's give this, a month with Jordan Hicks as a starter after having gone through the past 4 seasons exclusively training to be a reliever, going through this spring training exclusively training to be a reliever. Let's see if it could work. Obviously, it didn't. It was doomed from the very beginning, and it didn't work out, and they went back to him as a reliever the following seasons. He got a total of 8 starts in his Cardinals career. 8, all in that one stretch of the opportunity in season in which he got to try to be a starter. Matthew Liberatore has already had 21 starts at the big league level. Zach Thompson has already had 12 starts at the big league level. Both of them, when they've been in the minors, the entire time have been starters. This is not the same situation as Jordan Hicks. This is the thing that I get frustrated about is, if you want to talk about the Cardinals not giving guys opportunities and that being why they've gone elsewhere and had success, Randy Arozarena, Jordan Hicks as a starter, etc., I'm more than happy to have that discussion. When guys get opportunities here, like Thompson has, like Liberatore has, like Dylan Carlson has, if they end up, Tyler O'Neill did, when they go in elsewhere to have success, you can ask why that didn't happen here, but I'm not going to be as critical of the Cardinals for just whiffing on those guys as somebody like a Jordan Hicks who, they had him here, did not give him the opportunity to start, goes elsewhere and has success. Why didn't you try that here? That's what I get frustrated by.
Yeah, I'm with you. I find that frustrating, but I wouldn't say that the Cardinals didn't give them a chance. They've had their chance to be a starter, have Liberatore and Thompson. And for Zach Thompson, it just has not worked. Sure, he did look good in that one stretch last year at the back end of 2023, but for whatever reason, he can't maintain velocity, which was an issue for Matthew Liberatore. And if you see Matthew Liberatore, he can't get right-handed batters out. And I just don't think that those guys, forget the opportunity that they're having. The reason I don't think they can become a Jordan Hicks, they just don't have the stuff. Their stuff is fine. And I just looked this up because I love seeing on Baseball Savant where they can compare pitchers based on their velocity and their movement, a.k.a. stuff. You know who Jordan Hicks comparisons are for stuff so far this season? Luis Castillo, pretty good. Yeah. Bryce Miller, pretty good. And some guy named Sandy Alcantara that was pretty good back in 2022. Now, here's the guys for Matthew Liberatore. Zach Thompson, who we're talking about. The guy you just saw start for the LA Angels last night in Reed Detmers. And some guy named Chris Murphy, who I've never heard of. Now, one comp he does have on here is Max Fried, but I just looked this up because I was curious. Okay, does Fried have issues with getting righties out in his career? No. Righties and lefties, it doesn't matter. Fried can get those guys out. Liberatore can't get righties out. Now, maybe you should say they should try and find a way to kind of fiddle with a pitch, maybe work on a cutter. I saw in the paper today, Sonny Gray told him to throw to right-handed batters, but he's been given an opportunity. The Cardinals have worked with him to try and fix this right-handed issue, and they worked with him to try and maintain velocity, and it didn't work. So I'm with you. They've given these guys opportunities, and it's just not working as a starter. Maybe they can try and figure out what went wrong with Zach Thompson. I'm willing to listen to that one a little bit because there was some success in 2023 in the back half when he was a starter. There's no record of success for Matthew Liberatore as a starter. He is I hate to say it, failed starter that becomes a good bullpen arm, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think they've got to find a way to get him back into the bullpen. I don't know how you do it because they desperately do need someone to fill this 5 spot, but I don't fear that these guys are going to get away from the Cardinals and become like a Jordan Hicks who's pitching like a Cy Young caliber pitcher right now.
Yeah, I've got your answer as to who could become that player. But it is not either of the two that were mentioned earlier today in Thompson or in Liberatore. It's Ryan Helsley. If you want to talk about a guy that could go on elsewhere, if somebody else decides to trade for him this year at the deadline, if the Cardinals end up out of this thing and at the deadline they're sellers and Ryan Helsley becomes one of the players that they trade, and they should if they're out of it and they decide to sell, Ryan Helsley could go somewhere else and for the remainder of this season be a dominant closer for that team. And then next season comes back and has the type of success with another team that you're seeing right now with Jordan Hicks as a starter. That's the guy that should terrify Cardinals fans. Because if you look at Ryan Helsley as a minor league starter, dude, he was really good. And then he ran into some issues, staying healthy, and they decided, okay, we gotta immediately kind of turn the page here. He's got to be a guy that ends up becoming a reliever. You look back at 2018, AA and AAA, ended up making 13 starts that year with a 3.95 ERA. He was striking out more than 10 batters per 9 innings. So he had strikeout stuff as a starter. The next year ends up in AAA. In and out of the rotation. That's really the beginning of him becoming a reliever because of injury issues. 4.5 ERA and in 37 innings had a strikeout rate right around 10 per 9 innings. Next season comes up to the big league level and boom, now he's a reliever for you and never ends up changing what he is. If you decided to make him a starter next season here in St. Louis, you would be short on innings because he would eventually run into an innings limit because he just has not thrown enough innings in recent seasons. Like since 2022, end of that season to where we are today, he's thrown like 60 innings. So next year he'd probably be capped at like 120, maybe at the high end of things. And the Cardinals just can't do that because they don't have enough depth to be able to cover up for what they would be needing out of Ryan Helsley. And they don't have a clear and obvious replacement internally to become their next closer. Other teams have that. Other teams can look at Ryan Helsley and say, I can get 15 starts out of him next year. And that's good enough for me that by the end of the season, if he's still available and we can use him going into the playoffs, we've got a dominant 5-inning starter that could be our version of a right-handed Blake Snell. Like that's what you're looking at with him. And then in 26, now I've got a dude that can start for me all season long, and I would love to see what that looks like. He's the guy that scares me.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating part for as the Cardinals organization as a whole, not so much the player development side or the player itself, is the fact that the organization is not in a spot to where they can do these experiments.
Yep.
Because I like the idea now that we've seen it work. Because, look, I was one of those that when the Giants signed Hicks and said we're making him a starter, and when the Braves signed Lopez and said we're making him a starter, I went, why would you do that? He's already a good bullpen arm, and it's clear it didn't work. Okay, well, it's proven it's working now. And, yes, there is an innings deficit, but it's frustrating that the Cardinals can't go through this experiment with whether it be a Ryan Helsley, if they wanted to go out and sign Jordan Hicks, which they were reported to have interest in doing this offseason. They couldn't do this kind of experiment because they just have no depth in their minor league system. And that's frustrating because we're seeing it right now. They're telling what their actions by sticking with Matthew Liberatore in the rotation, they're telling you we have no faith in anything that's in AAA right now. And honestly, I don't know how that changes in a couple months. I don't know where that depth's coming from to where they could do this kind of experiment. The Giants can do that with Jordan Hicks. The Braves can do that with a Ronaldo Lopez. The Cardinals have got to get the pitching pipeline filled up to where there is depth options to where they can start to experiment with this. And they are not in a spot to where they could do these kind of experiments, which is frustrating.
So if you look right now down in AAA, one of the things that I've heard a lot, and I'm part of it, is, hey, the Cardinals should call somebody up from AAA, whether it's Robersa or Adam Kloffenstein. Go that route instead of continuing to trot out Matthew Liberatore. One of the reasons why I believe, T-Bone, that the Cardinals are not doing that is because of the age, the inexperience that those guys have at the AAA level. The Cardinals right now are throwing out the youngest rotation in AAA in all of Major League Baseball. There are 146 starters, 146 in AAA that have thrown at least 20 innings this season, which is not a high bar to clear. That's what 2 of the Cardinals' 6 starters are right around 30, and that's the lowest right now. So 146 starters down in AAA. 18 of those 146 starters are 23 years old or younger. The Cardinals have 4 of those 18 in their current AAA rotation. That includes Robersa, Adam Kloffenstein, Michael McGreevy, and Victor Santos. Those 4 guys are 23 or younger. The one that everybody wants to come up right now, and I'm with you guys, I've been calling for it as well, is Sim Robersa. He's 22 years old. He's made 8 starts down in AAA so far, 47 innings, has a 2.65 ERA. I think they should call him up and just see what it looks like. T-Bone, we were talking about this earlier today, though. Do you know how many guys right now have thrown at least 20 innings at the big league level this year that are 23 years old or younger? It's 4. 4 of them. Major league teams just do not have starters this young come up to the big leagues, and almost nobody comes up at this age and has success at the big league level. Sim Robersa would be a massive outlier. And when they do, they're typically top flight prospects. They're guys that were can't miss guys. They're like Paul Skeens, right? Coming up and last year, first round pick, and this year they're ready to go. Sim Robersa isn't that. This is a guy that the Cardinals were able to get last year at the trade deadline, and it was like, oh, maybe he becomes a 5-starter. So do you risk the possibility of bringing him up to the big league level and him just not being ready and getting destroyed right away and ruining the confidence? I think you probably stick him down at the AAA level now. And so what does that mean? It means your other alternative is Adam Kloffenstein, who right now is a 5.3 ERA at AAA. This is how you end up in a spot that the Cardinals are at right now, which is why I would just go out and sign like a Rich Hill. Just go sign somebody that can take that 5th spot and allow you to put Matthew Liberatore back into the bullpen where he belongs, where he's best suited, and where you can now use him multiple times a week when you have chances to win those games. I don't like the way they're handling this, but they're handling it this way because they had no depth coming into the season. They put themselves into this scenario.
Yeah, and what they should have done now, look, this is hindsight. What I'm about to bring up was they should have started stretching out Palante in the offseason. Just to add another guy that could go into this, what they were hoping was going to be this cluster of guys. Because remember, coming into the year, it was, okay, Thompson's our 6th. They clearly thought Rom was going to be their 7th. And then if you stretched out Palante, you could have Palante as your 7th, right? Now you've suddenly got 3 guys that are there to where if Thompson's bad and Rom gets hurt, okay, at least you've got one other arm. And they just don't have that right now. And to the point of Roberse, he probably should be in Double-A. And look, I know his numbers have been good in Triple-A. It's clear that they are rushing these guys through the system to hopefully have some depth by the time you get to July. For whether you are a seller or if you just need starting pitching depth, that hopefully Roberse can learn quickly on the fly, and that's a lot to ask from those young kids. It is almost them speeding up development once again. We talk about it on the hitter side where it was Jordan Walker rushed through the system? Victor Scott clearly was rushed through the system, skipping AAA and getting up to the Major League level and was not ready. Mason Witten, not ready last year. He wasn't rushed, though, but he's another example to throw out here. Carlson, another one. It's starting to happen on the pitching side because they are so dry on their depth. They have no pitching depth that they have to start rushing these guys, and they probably need Roberse to sit in AAA for probably 2 years to really start to feel comfortable with where he is at in the development side. But because they don't have that 5-starter, they may be forced to rush him again to the big league level. It's why I'm with you. They need to find somebody on the open market that can come in and just take the ball every 5th day and go out there and start.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That's Grant Francis, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen here on 101 ESPN. 403-999-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You give us 2 scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely here on BK and Ferrario. T-Bone, more likely to happen. The Phillies end up with the best record in the National League, or somebody from the AL Central has the best record in the American League.
Oh.
Both would be massive surprises relative to expectations heading into this season. Right now, the Phillies do indeed have the best record in the National League, and the Guardians and the Kansas City Royals are both about a game to 2 back of the New York Yankees in the American League.
I'm going to go with more likely that the Phillies end up with the best record in the National League because their pitching's been really good, and we know that Wheeler, Nola, and Suarez are good pitchers, and now they've found a couple guys as well on the back end that can really play well. Their lineup's loaded, and they've got a solid bullpen.
And oh, by the way, Castellanos is still not hitting.
Yeah, which is terrifying. And Turner's not in the lineup anymore right now because he's on the IL, if I'm not mistaken. It's Edmundo Sosa. Man, we lost that trade. But
he's been great.
Yeah. But I love the Phillies, and I heard Eduardo Perez bring this up. You know, the Cardinals always have been saying we're notorious slow starters. We always start slow, and then it didn't end up being true last year. That's the Phillies. The Phillies have been notorious slow starters in the Bryce Harper era, and now they're coming out of the gates. I think they're a sustainable team, so I would say it is more likely the Phillies have the best record.
What they're getting out of Spencer Turnbull is what surprised me. We knew their front 3 was going to be really good this year in their rotation. What they're getting from the back of their rotation is what's really allowed them to become this version of themselves. Christopher Sanchez, so far this year, has been great, 3.4 ERA, and Spencer Turnbull has been one of the, just in terms of the results, one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball so far this year, coming off of all of those injuries that he had with the Tigers. So I agree. I think it is the Phillies. As of today, they're playing the best baseball in Major League Baseball. So I would go with Philly. T-Bone?
Guys, more likely to make the All-Star game, Mason Wynn or Lance Lynn?
Oh, Mason Wynn.
Not buying the Lynn bar fight? Okay. I would agree with that. I think it's Mason Wynn.
Yeah, I don't think it's close. Who are the other shortstops in the National League that would get in over him right now?
Turner will still get votes even though he is injured.
Yeah. If he misses
Betts,
6 weeks, though, like, come on.
Mookie Betts will probably be the guy.
Yeah. Ellie De La Cruz. Ellie will get a bunch of votes this year.
He's been really good. But that's probably the 2. Like, I'm trying to think if there's anybody else.
Willie Adames has been good.
Yeah, he'll probably, well, I'd say he's going to play in the AL, but he probably
That's probably it, though. Mason Wynn would be right there after.
Yeah, I don't think he'll end up getting in because the Cardinals have this guy named Ryan Helsley that's pretty good at baseball, and Sonny Gray, but he's probably their 3rd best candidate right now. I can't think of anybody else because, like, Carriage has been good and Romero's been good, but you don't really see, like, setup relievers make the All-Star game. The reason I threw out Lynn was I was trying to think of, like, somebody that's been playing well that you weren't expecting, and it's not a big list, you know?
I don't think that would happen, but how funny would it be to see Lance Lynn at the All-Star game?
It'd be great, especially given
fantastic.
what our reaction was coming off of his signing.
Imagine if it was Lynn and Gibson making the All-Star game.
Did you know he's on pace, by the way, Mason Wynn is for about 30 steals so far this year?
Yeah, he's been quicker than I was expecting. I wasn't expecting him to be a guy that could have, like, 20 stolen bases, so the fact that he's on pace for 30 is shocking. How about this? You know who has the highest WAR on the team right now?
As of this year?
Yeah.
Is it a position player?
Yeah, the top 5 would tell you, like,
I would assume Wilson Contreras would be right up there, but
he's 2nd.
Who's that one?
Mason Wynn.
Really? Okay.
Mason Wynn.
I like
Now, this is Baseball References WAR. I don't know what, like, Fangraphs has, but Mason Wynn is number 1 in WAR at 1.8. Contreras 2. You know who 3, 4, and 5 are? It's pitchers.
Really?
Yeah.
Starters? Sonny Gray.
Only 1 starter.
Kyle Gibson. Ryan Helsley?
Gibson's 5. Helsley's 4. You know who 3 is? And this is shocking.
Ridge?
No, but it's another one of those setup arms.
JoJo?
It's JoJo.
He's been amazing.
Their top 5 in WAR, and this explains the Cardinals, is Mason Wynn, Wilson Contreras, JoJo Romero, Ryan Helsley, Kyle Gibson.
Damn.
And you know who's not even on the list for the top 12? Paul Goldschmidt.
Yeah, Goldie and Arenado's probably pretty low on that list.
He's
too.
11th.
And all of that is coming from his defense.
Yeah.
All of it. Grant?
All right, I'm going to go to the NHL playoffs, which is no surprise, but we got 2 series going on right now that teams are needing to come back in. Started last night. Boston started to come back. They won in Florida. That series is at 3-2 for the Panthers.
But Alex told us that couldn't happen.
It's not going to happen.
Over.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Okay.
But we got one tonight. It's going to be on 101 ESPN Game 5, Dallas and Colorado. More likely to happen, Boston comes back in their series or Colorado comes back in their series?
Oh, man. I think it's more likely Boston just because they've got that extra game. I think stuff's weird around Colorado right now with this, is it Nichushkin?
Yeah.
He's out for the next 6 months or whatever. I think this is just not their year. I think that for whatever reason, things didn't come together the way that they hoped that it would this season for them. I know that everybody disagrees. I just don't think Dallas is a great team. I think they're a good team that is having a great postseason thus far. I think they will eventually lose in the playoffs in the next round, whoever they end up meeting. Most likely the Oilers, in my opinion. But I don't see Colorado coming back just because they're down so much right now.
Yeah, I don't think either comes back, but I would go with with Boston, just because I agree with you. Things just feel off with Colorado right now. They're not getting good goaltending. You have the Nichushkin thing that happens. And with Florida, with like Jim,
we'll eventually get that name right.
I know, but it's hard.
It's a tough one.
At least with Boston, like I like their team and they've been overperforming, and I really like Jim Montgomery. And if there's a coach that could do it, it would be him. But
yeah, he
I
never
think both are
gives
losing.
up 3-1 leads in a postseason.
No, that happened. That was a fluke. Okay, I don't know why you keep going back to that.
No, I don't think either is going to happen either. But honestly, I would take Colorado over Boston. I think Florida's just too good. You look at the games earlier on in the series. Game 4, the Panthers outshot Boston 41-18.
Yep.
The game before that, they outshot Boston 33-17. Like, they've just been dominating. And last night, Florida just ran into a hot Jeremy Swayman. So, yeah, I don't think either's going to happen, but I would actually take Colorado here.
Florida and New York is going to be a funny.
That's going to be a heck of a series.
It's going to be amazing. Those teams, it's classic old school Western Conference playoffs is what you're seeing right now in the East. It's crazy how much it's flipped.
Yeah.
The Western Conference is more the wide open, free flowing game, and the Eastern Conference is very physical
Think
right
back
now.
to it's been 5 years since the Blues won the Cup. The West was that physical style, and the East was more of that wide open game. And you're right, it's completely flipped.
Well, and add on to it that it's going to be Shesterkin and Bobrovsky too, who have been probably the two best goalies in the playoffs this year. So that's going to be entertaining too.
So much better. The Eastern Conference is so much better this year. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. Guys, more likely to happen. The next GM and manager of the Cardinals will come from inside the organization or outside the organization. I'm going to consider inside the organization anybody that has ties to the organization. So that will include Skip Schumacher. That will include Daniel Descalso, those kinds of people. And it will include Chaim Bloom, who is currently with the organization. So wanted to put that out there. You think it's going to be somebody that has ties to the organization or a new voice?
I would say it is more likely to somebody that is inside the organization because the Cardinals haven't gone that route before. Even Mo was an internal promotion, right, if I'm not mistaken. So I would say it's definitely more likely that they are going to stick with something inside the organization. I've always argued if you're going to quote-unquote clean house, you should go with someone outside the organization. So, like, if they did decide, like, hey, it's not working with Mo, we should just change things up. We need to fire everybody. Fire the Pobo, fire the manager. I would say you need to look externally, but I just don't think that they're going to do that.
You took the words right out of my mouth. That's what I was going to say. Like, it's not something that the Cardinals really do, going outside the organization. So I would put my money on them staying within the organization, but I think they should go outside the organization. But at the same time, you know, this isn't a situation the Cardinals have found themselves in a really long time, so maybe they switch up their mindset when it comes to their next hire. But no, I think they'll probably stay within the organization as well.
If I'm not mistaken, the Cardinals have, under the DeWitts, have not hired anybody external to take over their baseball operations. I guess it's like, Walt Jocketty was already in place when the DeWitts took over, and they just kept him internal. And then eventually it was John Mozeliak who took over, who was already here.
Everybody around Mo came up through the system. Like Gersh, I don't remember what Gersh started as, but he got promoted through. Flores got promoted through. I guess Gary LaRocque was always there?
Yeah. And then technically, I guess they did hire Tony La Russa, but he had a connection to Walt Jocketty. So I don't know, man. I don't think that they're going to hire from outside the organization because it's just not something that the team does. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. We'll get to a couple of these from the text line here on BK and Ferrario. Guys, more likely to happen. Tyler O'Neill hits more home runs than Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt combined, or the Cardinals pitching staff shuts him down for the entire series.
Yeah, well, not that one. I would go more likely that he hits more home runs combined than Goldie and Arenado. Now, if that was just for that series, I would really... it's a little closer, but man, for the season, he's definitely going to hit more home runs than those two because those guys just do not have any power right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think every time Tyler O'Neill comes up to the plate in that series against the Cardinals, it's going to be like, turn your head, don't watch, because it just has that feeling that it's going to be a revenge tour for him, especially with the start he's had. Yeah.
More likely, Matz is in your rotation next year or Oli is in the dugout next year. That's a fun one. I think it's Matz in the rotation as of today.
I do too, because they clearly do not want to make him a bullpen arm for some. Well, I know why, because they don't have any pitching depth and money. They're going to play the contract, but yeah, I would say it's definitely more likely that. I could totally see where the Cardinals move on from Oli at the end of the season.
All right, coming up in 15 minutes, we're going to dive into the junk drawer. But next, where are the Blues deficient right now when it comes to their Stanley Cup checklist? We'll go through this coming up next year on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Cardinals last night won 7-6 after blowing a 5-run lead in L.A. with the Angels. They'll close out that series tonight looking to sweep the Angels and win their 4th game in a row. It'll be Lance Lynn on the mound for the Cardinals going up against Griffin Canning for the Angels. 8:07 first pitch tonight. And here on 101 ESPN tonight, we'll have Game 5 between the Dallas Stars and the Colorado Avalanche. Stars have a chance to win that series tonight and move on to the Western Conference Finals. Pregame will start here on 101 ESPN at 6:30. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
The Athletic does something cool where they break down exactly what it takes to be able to win a Stanley Cup. And generally speaking, they get it right. The teams that go to the Cup end up having all of these things. And the Blues had it a few years ago. Right now, they very much do not. There's a lot that goes into this. It includes having elite players at center, winger, defenseman, goalie. It includes having legit top-line players at center, 2 wingers, and a number 1 defenseman, and then adding a little bit more into this criteria. A couple of more top 6 forwards, a couple of top pair defensemen. The Blues, in terms of the things that I just mentioned, there's 12 different pieces of criteria that go into being a Stanley Cup contender. Based upon the performances this year, by the nerdy advanced numbers from The Athletic, they had 4 of them. 4 out of the 12 things that you need in order to be a Stanley Cup contender. That was an elite center with Robert Thomas, an elite goalie with Jordan Binnington, another top-line winger with Jordan Kyrou, and then apparently Kevin Hayes qualified as a top 6 forward. I think that's a bunch of nonsense.
Good for him.
No chance. Based on their projections for next year, they would qualify for 4 of these. Pavel Buchnevich would qualify as an elite-level winger, Justin Falk as a number 1 defenseman, Jordan Kyrou as a number 1 forward, and then you'd have top pair defensively, Torrey Krug. Guys, I think Robert Thomas is an elite-level center. I would throw him into that mix. When you look at the rest of this, though, and I would also include Jordan Binnington, I think they've got half of this stuff right now on their roster projected for next season. When you guys look at where they are currently falling short compared to other Stanley Cup contenders around the league, what do you think they were most likely to add this offseason to this list? Whether it's somebody that grows into a role or somebody that they are going to acquire that fits into a role in the things that they're currently missing, T-Bone?
I would think if they're going to look to acquire something, it would have to be, whether you want to call it an elite defenseman or a number 1 defenseman, would be the one for me. Because I don't know if I would say Parayko's an elite defenseman, but I would definitely say he's a number 1 defenseman, that you're always searching for the guy with him. But, like, for example, is Shea Theodore an elite defenseman? I guess offensively he is, so maybe he falls into that category. So
he fit into their criteria this year.
That is the one that I would look at, because like a lot of those, in terms of like looking at those forward spots, like to me, Pavel Buchnevich, I don't think he's an elite winger. I don't think he's going to be an elite winger next year. I do agree with Kyrou being a top line winger, kind of the same with Jake Neighbors. I think they proved that this year. At least Kyrou on your second line, Neighbors can kind of go between the top and the second. But I think they feel like they've got some of those internally. Like their top line center, they probably believe is Dvorsky moving forward. In terms of the elite winger, they probably view it's Jimmy Snuggerud that's moving forward. So I don't expect them to go out and make an addition that would fill that spot this offseason. The one for me would be either elite defenseman or the top pair defenseman guys, because I think you got to completely revamp this blue line if you're going to get back into a Stanley Cup contender tier. And how do you start that? You probably start that this offseason, and it probably takes 2 or 3 off seasons before you can feel really comfortable about the blue line.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Like, the defenseman is the biggest, glaring problem on this team. The fact that, on this list, they have Justin Falk slated in at the number 1 defenseman role behind Colton Parayko at the elite defenseman role, that's not going to cut it. Like, Justin Falk and Torrey Krug can't be your number 2 and 3 best defensemen on the team. Maybe at one point in their career, you could, but at this point in their career, you just can't. Like, if you want to have success with those 2 guys on your team, one needs to be a second pair defenseman. The other probably needs to be a third pair defenseman. And Nick Leddy should be, in those as well, second or third pairing. If you're talking about winning a Stanley Cup, and this goes back to the conversation we've had before. Right now with the Blues, and this is true of a lot of teams that are retooling or rebuilding or whatever. Everybody's playing a slot too high.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, that's the problem, and it checks out when you look at this list. Most of the players on this list, they're a slot too high. And the Blues aren't going to be in the conversation of being a Stanley Cup contender until that sort of reverts back to everybody's in their role accordingly. Like, I'm sorry, Kevin Hayes should not be on this list.
Agreed.
He's playing for Team USA right now in the World Championship.
Yeah, okay.
When I look at this, I think they have the elite center in Thomas for now and for the future.
Agreed.
I think they have
agree.
the elite goalie for now and for the future with Jordan Binnington. I do not think you have an elite level winger. I do not think you have an elite level defenseman currently on this roster, and I don't think there's anybody in the minor leagues or in their prospect pool that projects to be either of those two players. I think you have a top 6 center in Dvorsky that's currently in your system. He's not on the roster right now, but eventually I think he will plug into that spot, and I think that's what the plan is at the very minimum. I think you have a top-line winger in Kyrou and Buchnevich. They're not elite. I think they could be top-line wingers, though, or somebody that fits into that criteria. I think you have a top-pair defenseman in Colton Parayko currently on the roster. I think you have other top 6 forwards either currently here or in the system with Jake Neighbors and Jimmy Snuggerud. I don't know if Snuggerud's ever going to be a legit elite-level winger, but I'm pretty confident their plan is for him to be in the top 6, so I'd plug him into that. I don't know that you have other top-pair defensemen currently on the roster. I wouldn't have Leddy in that regard. I wouldn't have Falk or Krug in that regard. I think those are just guys that are on the roster that are fine long-term. So if I'm looking for what do you still need for now and for the future to be a legitimate contender in the NHL, you're looking for an elite-level winger, an elite-level defenseman, and then 2 other defensemen that can really help you. Maybe it's just one. Maybe if you get that elite defenseman, that ends up taking a little bit of the load off of what you were talking about there, Grant, with some of the defensemen that are playing a step up. Maybe they look better in a lesser role, and one of them can fit into that criteria. So it's really just an elite defenseman and a top-pair defenseman that you need to acquire, and somebody else will step up. I think you need 3, maybe 4 pieces to what this criteria holds right now. Unfortunately, 2 of those are like the hardest things in the NHL to find. I need an elite level winger and an elite level defenseman. Aisle 2, yeah, please. I would like to have 2 of those, please, for it. $150 million a piece. Like that's the thing that's so hard about where the Blues are at right now. You can see depth-wise how this could kind of all come together, but if I lock myself in long-term to Pavel Buchnevich being one of these top-line wingers, where do I go find the elite guy unless he becomes it? Where do I go find the elite guy unless Kyrou can be that guy or Snuggerud can be that guy? That's where things get really difficult for the way that they're trying to build, is they're missing some of the hardest things to find in the NHL.
Yeah, and to the point on Buchnevich there real quick, sorry to cut you off, Grant, is you either have to bank on him becoming that, or Kyrou, as you said, or it's got to be Snuggerud. Because it would have to, somewhere you got to make up for where you just spent on Pavel Buchnevich, because you're not going to have the money to then throw out an elite winger and an elite defenseman. If you don't re-sign Buch, I think there's a spot where you could get to in like 2 years maybe, where you've got money for both of those. But again, elite defensemen don't typically hit free agency. Why? Because nobody would let them go over like a no-move clause or something, like it never really happens. But if you sign up Buchnevich, you almost need to have a young kid come in and become an elite winger on a rookie contract.
And this is why I would consider moving Buch or Kyrou this offseason if in return you're getting something that is elite. Yeah. If you're getting an elite level winger or an elite level defenseman, I would consider making those moves. Like, for example, if this would never happen, but if you called Vegas and they said, hey, Alex Pietrangelo is available, and he's willing to waive his no-move clause to you guys. And they said, we want Pavel Buchnevich in return. We're okay with 1 year. We're not going to re-sign him long-term, but at his current contract, it'll save us $3 million, which is what we're probably going to save if we trade like a Braden McNabb, right? But based upon the difference there, and in this situation, if I'm Vegas, I'm getting an elite or top-line winger in return for our defenseman that's had an up-and-down season this year. And if the Blues still view him as an elite-level defenseman, I would make that deal if I'm them, because it puts me closer it puts me on pace to becoming a team that can really contend. I don't want to just trade those guys for spare parts, though, because now I've got to fill that spot on this checklist as well. I'm not trading Jordan Kyrou for the 5th overall pick. I'm not trading Pavel Buchnevich for a mid-first round pick or for prospects. I need something that gets me closer to becoming a legitimate contender again if I'm going to move on from those types of assets.
Well, and a couple things that in looking at this that jumped out at me too, like goaltending wise, the Blues are set in a couple areas, in my opinion. Goaltending, they're set. And one area that this list didn't include is the backup goaltender role, which I think is heavily overlooked. Like, you look at a couple of the series right now going on, like Pyotr Kochetkov for Carolina has come in, and he's struggled a little bit. Give me Joel Hofer over him. Artur Silovs for Vancouver has been playing well. Give me Joel Hofer over him. Same with Calvin Pickard, who just came in for Edmonton last night and won a game. Like, give me Joel Hofer over them. They're set with their goaltending, and then I think they're set down the middle at center. I really do. Like, I'd be shocked if the Blues went out and got a center this year, even though they need it. They need it for next season. But
Dvorsky is that guy.
Yeah.
I'll say, as long as you're referring to that as Dvorsky
Yes.
is that guy and not that Chen is. Because I think the future for Braden Chen is either a third-line center or a potential, like, top six winger or a third-line winger. I don't see him at center long-term.
I think if you're talking about the Blues being in a Stanley Cup contending role, and let's say this is 3-4 years down the road, we're a little bit deeper into that Braden Chen contract, I think the best scenario for the Blues in that situation is that Braden Chen is taking the Alexander Steen role and he's playing fourth-line center on that team.
Yeah.
I think that's the best case scenario down the road for this team.
I think so, too. I think he could be on the wing. I think it just depends on what you end up having down the middle at that point.
Yeah.
But I think he's a guy that can play all over, and he gives you a little bit of flexibility down the road. I don't think this team is really far away. I think it's just incredibly difficult for us to see how they acquire the players that they're missing. And that's where it feels like they're as far away as they are. Alongside T-Bone and Grant, I'm BK. Coming up next, the Junk Drawer here on 101 ESPN. All right, so we got the NFL schedule release later on tonight, 8 o'clock. We're going to know basically the entire schedule by then. It was announced a little bit ago, the Black Friday game is going to be between the Chiefs and the Raiders this year. It's going to be on Amazon Prime. If you don't have every streaming service available, good luck watching football this year. That's just the way that it's going to go, apparently. I wanted to ask you guys a question in relation to this. If I told you, hey, it's all expenses paid. You are determining where you go, who you want to see. You're going to a regular season game. Playoffs are out on this, and no majors for golf tournaments, anything like that. But you're going to a regular season game, and you get to decide who the teams are that are playing and which venue you're going to be able to watch this in. So you decide the stadium, the home stadium for one of the two, and who you're going to see. Are you going to an NFL game between a couple of teams? Are you going to a baseball game, hockey game, NBA? What is the game that you would most want to see if it was all expenses paid and you just get to go enjoy it?
That's interesting. Well, it's not a baseball game. I'm a big baseball fan. It's not a hockey game. I think I would go football. I don't know if there's an NBA team that would really catch my interest. Like a couple years ago, my answer would definitely have been like going to the Staples Center to watch LeBron play like Steph.
Sure.
Or Cleveland, or to the, Oracle Arena to watch them play each other. But they're not there now. I think I would probably, I'm going to say this and I'm not even going to look at them. It probably would be to Arrowhead Stadium. And it probably would be for Chiefs versus... I would probably go Bengals just because the Bengals are the team that's had their number. Bills would be interesting. Texans would be interesting. But because the Bengals have been able to beat them, I would want to go to that atmosphere in a regular season rivalry and watch those two teams play. As long as it's not in like December and it's like -30 out.
Honestly, I'm going to go a little bit off the board here, but I'm going to see the best atmosphere. Like, that's what I love, is the best atmosphere. So I'm going to go to a rivalry game in college football.
Well,
that's what I would do. I would go see like Ohio State. Yeah, I'd go see Alabama, Auburn. I've gone to the Iron Bowl before. And
have you?
Yeah, I did in Tuscaloosa one year, and it ended up being a blowout. So it wasn't as crazy of an atmosphere just because it was over so quickly. But I'm telling you, like, there's probably no better atmosphere than a close game, a rivalry game in college football. That's probably what I would do.
I should have said that college football was off limits because of that.
Okay.
It's a totally fair answer. It's a great answer, honestly. The atmosphere, that is different than anything else because it almost feels like a playoff game, right? The stakes in college football, regular season,
gets in.
are basically a playoff style atmosphere, and that's what you just can't replicate in a 17 game regular season for the NFL, where you're getting 7 teams into the playoffs, 162 games for baseball, 80 plus games for NBA, NHL, etc. You can't replicate that. It's what makes college sports so special, is that you feel like every game truly does matter. And even today, where you're in a place where the college football playoff is expanded, it's a little different. There's still stuff that matters in the regular season, and that's the closest thing. It artificially feels like a playoff game there. It's a great answer. Am I crazy if I'm still going baseball?
What?
I think I would go to Dodger Stadium for a Phillies versus Dodgers game. I think that would be the atmosphere is amazing. I've never been to Dodger Stadium. Being able to see the number of stars that are currently on the field for both of those teams. How many Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers, are currently playing for one of the Phillies or the Dodgers? Bryce Harper.
Turner.
Is Zach Wheeler going to end up being a Hall of Famer?
He's probably the closest one for that group of starters. He'll be close, but I think, he's probably a Hall of Famer.
Trey Turner?
He's got a chance.
JT Realmuto, if you're going to get a catcher from this era, has a chance.
Otani will get in from the Dodgers. Yeah. Freeman's and Betts are Hall of Famers. If Kershaw's healthy, Kershaw's a Hall of Famer.
Kershaw's going to be a Hall of Famer, no doubt.
Those are probably the guys.
Like I'd set the over-under at like 6. Yeah. Because we said 8 names that could get in, and you probably are going to end up getting fewer than that. To see that many people that are eventually going to be legitimate Hall of Famers in one game, I think that would be my answer.
I find it interesting you said Phillies, because if I were going to go baseball, I would want to go to Dodger Stadium and watch them play the Braves. Like, they just played the Braves over the weekend. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I watched every game of that. Now, granted, they killed them in one of those games, but that would be the one that I would want to watch. And it's kind of the same conversation. Like, The problem with the Braves is they got some younger guys, so there's still a lot to be determined. Like Acuna, one of the best players in baseball. Olsen, one of the best first basemen in baseball. Austin Riley, one of the best third basemen in baseball. They've got a great pitching staff. Like, that would be the rivalry that I would want if I were going to look baseball. Soccer probably falls in this too, by the way, of like the college one, because every game matters because there's no playoffs. No, I mean, Messi's a good call, but I was thinking like I would want to go to one of those significant rivalries in Europe, like Real Madrid and FC Barcelona, like one of those significant rivalries that happen. But that's kind of falls in the same one of college football because they don't have playoffs. They have where the regular season actually determines the winner of the season.
Somebody on the text line said, but BK, you've been to LA and the Cardinals were there playing.
Yeah.
Was there a special moment that took place?
Yeah, that would have been a hell of an atmosphere if that was actually going to happen that day.
Albert hit his 700th home run while I was
What were you doing?
7 minutes away eating dinner in Los Angeles.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It really does. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, Doug Gottlieb is trying to make a publicity stunt, and he's going to do it at the expense of kids. We'll tell you about that coming up in about 15 minutes. But coming up next are Skip and Bloom, the next leaders here in St. Louis. We'll tell you about it here on BK and Ferrario. How'd you sleep last night? How you feeling today? Are you a little down? Not quite the same amount of energy that you had 5, 10, 15 years ago? If these are potentially some of the issues that you're dealing with right now, it might be due to low testosterone. It's an underproduction or a lack of production of testosterone in men. It is normal. It happens to a lot of guys out there, and it goes untreated a lot of the time. It should not be that way for you. So go to Victory Men's Health today. They'll unlock your inner champion. They're going to help you out with any of those potential issues that are leading you to not having the performance that you should have. Maybe you have some erectile dysfunction issues. Again, 20 to 30 million people, 20 to 30 men in the United States are dealing with this. It can be age-related. They can help you out with that over at Victory Men's Health. Maybe it's something different entirely. They'll take a micronutrient test to find out what it is. It's not just a blanket, hey, you've got low testosterone, we're going to help you out with that. No, they're going to find out exactly what's going on with you, and then they're going to treat what is potentially hindering your performance. They're going to unlock that inner champion today. They've got 4 locations. Check them all out at Victory Men's Health and victorymenshealth.com. only 2.5 back in the wild card standings right now. Feels like they should be about 12 games back, but the National League has been really bad outside of the top 3 or 4 teams in the league so far this season with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. That's not going to stop us, though, from having a conversation about who the next president of baseball operations and manager will be of the St. Louis Cardinals. Because yesterday, Ken Rosenthal was on Foul Territory, the YouTube show T-Bone with AJ Brzezinski. And they asked him, hey, what's going on in St. Louis? Who do you think are going to be the future leaders there? And they asked specifically about Skip Schumacher, the current manager of the Miami Marlins, who has decided he doesn't want to be there long-term, most likely. That's why his contract only has this year remaining on him. And Chaim Bloom, who's now an advisor within the Cardinals organization as of this offseason. Here's what Ken Rosenthal had to say.
I would say maybe Skip has a better chance of being there than Chaim. I just see Skip as being a guy who's going to be out of Miami for sure. I'm not certain that the Cardinals will want to elevate Chaim. He's a special advisor now. It certainly is possible, and you can look at Boston in one of 2 ways. A lot of the things that he did, you're seeing the fruits of that right now. At the same time, it took the new regime coming in to dramatically overhaul their pitching program. The Cardinals are, without question, a team that we are all looking at and wondering what their future is going to be, both immediately, can they salvage this season, and long-term, will John Mozeliak remain president of baseball operations?
All right, let's start here, T-Bone. We're talking a big picture right now. I hope that the Cardinals get this thing back on track. It'd be great. It would be fantastic theater for everybody involved if they're able to get back into the race. But if they continue going down the less ideal path and they end up completely out of this race and everybody gets fired, we have to admit that that's at least a realistic possibility here this year. What do you want them to do? And what I mean by that is not just specifically like which candidates do you want them to look for, but do you want them to look for guys that have a history of being in St. Louis? Do you want them to just start fresh, have new eyes on the situation, and get a new outlook on the organization? Like, what are you looking for if they decide to go a new path, something that is different from John Mozeliak and Oli Marmol?
So for the manager side, I wouldn't mind like a Skip Schumacher just because we've seen he is a good manager. He won manager of the year last year, and that team losing isn't really his fault, just like I don't really believe that for Oli this year. But that one I don't mind going with a Skip Schumacher, a guy that's been a former player that has some managing experience under his belt. For the front office side of things, Chaim Bloom would be interesting, but his track record in Boston, as you heard Ken describe, there is a bunch of, there were some hits, as you're kind of seeing now with what their pitching looks like, but there are a lot of misses, especially when it came down to how he operated around the trade deadline. I almost would rather them just kind of bring in a fresh set of eyes that has no experience in the organization. I would want someone that can be brought in that has a good background in probably player development, but also has been with an organization that doesn't just do player development and is near the bottom of payroll, like a Tampa Bay Rays executive or like a Oakland Athletics executive. I would want somebody that's come in and has been able to have a good pipeline that they've been able to develop, draft and develop, but also be on an organization that does spend a little bit of money. That would be kind of the ideal route. Like, I'm trying to think of the best case scenario team for this, and I'm drawing a blank on who would be like the team that I would point to for this. Like, maybe Detroit's one of those teams where I don't think they've got that development guy, and I'm not trying to name a candidate, but they're an organization that in the past has spent money, but also has done the kind of rebuild and trying to retool it on the fly. Texas, that's a good one, where they spend money, but they're also trying to develop young pitching on the fly. Like, look at Jack Leiter, one of their top prospects. They've had a couple of good drafts recently to where they have, you've got a couple of their guys in Roby and Sajasi, as we've seen, they look pretty good that they were able to draft and develop. That's kind of what I would be looking for. I just think if you're going to change things from the front office perspective, I don't think you can just promote someone from internally. And that's not a shot against like a Michael Gersh or a Randy Flores or a Chaim Bloom. Like, I generally like Michael Gersh in our conversations we've had. But if you're going to look to do something new, I think you need to start from scratch and bring in fresh eyes from a different organization.
Would you consider Kim pairing her with Skip Schumacher? They both have a relationship. Clearly, Skip enjoyed it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had as much frustration about them deciding to go a different direction as he did. Now, it's a very small sample size with her down in Miami. We have no idea what it would look like if she was in a different organization. I think she did a pretty good job, generally speaking, but her hands were also tied behind her back for a lot of it because of the ownership situation that is there. Is that something that would appeal to you?
That would appeal to me. I'd be interested in that pairing, mate, because they did work well together. Now, granted, like you said, it was a small sample size. Now, granted, she does have such a small sample size, so it's hard to really pinpoint on this one spot, but I heard one of our favorite podcasts, The Roundtable, talk about it. She did have a weird trade in the Arise for Lopez deal. Like, that one was just a bizarre trade, in my opinion, for how it went down.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I disagree with that. I think it was smart. They had a lack of position player talent, and they had a surplus when it came to their pitching, and a lot of those guys just ended up getting hurt. So it looks bad in retrospect, but I think at the time it made a lot of sense.
It's not so much that. I think Lopez carries so much more value than a Luis Arise that she sold really high on a Pablo Lopez, but that's just one trade. And look, it's one example of that. It's hard to really go back to her.
In terms of like arguing in that regard, I think that a pitcher is always more likely to fall off of a cliff as opposed to a guy like Luis Arise who, hey, there's a very clear value here. And teams are going to value it differently because he doesn't have a clear and obvious position. He's not very good defensively. But the guy hits 300. he's going to wake up out of bed and he's going to hit 300. And part of why they had success last year was because of Luis Arise. If you just added in Pablo Lopez to that group and they didn't have Luis Arise, I don't think that's a team that would have contended for the playoffs a year ago.
Yeah, and to that point, that's the one trade that we can really point to. Everything else is so young on what she did in her 2 or 3 years there. But that is to the point that we were clamoring for in the offseason of Cardinals get creative. Like, move Matz to the bullpen. Go acquire another fifth starter that you can bring into this rotation. Like, whether that trade ended up, you liked it, I didn't. Like, that's a creative trade. That is something that she was willing to do to try and help spark their offense. And you're right, it did get them to the playoffs. So I would be interested in Kim Ding. I thought she was going to be someone that was going to be there long-term with the Miami Marlins. And like you said, she just got kind of stabbed in the back there. She is someone that I would have interest in if they were going to look outside the organization.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't hate the idea of Chaim Bloom. I think that he gets a little bit of a bad rap in Boston because the first thing they asked him to do was trade Mookie Betts. I don't think that was something that if he had his heart of hearts he wanted to do. But the organization told him, we're not re-signing this guy to the contract that he's going to be requesting. So if you're him, well, I got to get the best deal possible for him. I cannot believe that was the best deal that was made. I think it's a failure in everybody in Major League Baseball that was the only offer that he was able to get. But apparently it was. That being said, a lot of the pitching that you're seeing this year that's among the best in all of Major League Baseball for Boston, yeah, it took them until this year to be able to develop it and get it on the right path, but he developed it. He was the guy that was in charge as they were bringing these guys through the organization. He identified the talent that ended up working out there. So if you need to overhaul your pitching, if that is the number one criteria that you're looking for in your next president of baseball operations, you could do a lot worse than Chaim Bloom. And if part of what you're trying to accomplish is getting your pitching development into the 21st century, because you're like 30 years behind right now, well, Chaim Bloom was a big part of that process in Tampa. So if you're trying to recreate some of what Tampa was able to do there, yeah, putting that guy in charge of your baseball development, it would make a lot of sense. I think you could do much worse than Chaim Bloom. I think what's going to be really difficult, and this is why it's kind of a scary proposition to be in this place for the first time in St. Louis in almost 30 years, really. It's more likely you get this wrong than it is that you get it right. Like, the overwhelming odds are in favor of you getting a worse president of baseball operations after John Mozeliak than getting better. The Cardinals is a really good job, and a lot of people across Major League Baseball would be trying to get this opportunity because they have shown we're willing to stick with our guy. And so people know that there's job security here. They know it's a team that is, even if we get frustrated with it, is willing to spend at least to some degree, and you can win here. And you've got fans here. You're not going to have your legs cut out from underneath you as a president of baseball operations. So you'll have really good candidates. Many of them will fail. Many of them, whether it's here or elsewhere, will go on to have less success than where they were previously. So that's where it gets really dicey. And as for the manager side of things, I know Skip's a good manager, so I would look at that. I would absolutely consider it. There's just not a whole lot of managerial candidates out there, guys. When you look at the guys that were hired this past offseason, I mean, how many of them would you have even been interested in? I don't think they're going to hire Joe Madden. I don't think they're going to hire Terry Francona. I think they're going to go young. And I don't think you could do a whole lot better than somebody like Skip Schumacher. So that would definitely be somebody that I'm looking at.
And to that point, I don't mind that because you got a young core. So kind of have a young manager grow with the young core. The problem I have with the Chaim Bloom is, look, yeah, he lost the Betts trade. He was put in a terrible spot. Honestly, hell, he could be put in the same spot with Arenado's contract if he took over next year. But I felt like he did a lot of what Mo did, which was build middling teams. Like, you look at the years that he was down. So, like, yeah, they had a 92-win team in 2021, but in 22 and 23, 78 wins in both seasons. It was just middling teams. And then he did, like, my least favorite thing that a Pobo or GM can do at a trade deadline. He always did both. He would always buy and sell. And I hate when you do that because you're not doing anything. You're just kind of reshuffling the chairs that are on the deck. And look, maybe he learned from that experience in Boston and would be better on a second try. But that is the one critique that I would have of what Chaim Bloom did in Boston and why I would have concerns about him taking over in St. Louis.
Final thing on this, we'll get to the Doug Gottlieb thing in just a little bit. What do you think the reaction would be if, I don't think this is going to happen, but if the Cardinals hired Theo Epstein?
I think people would be excited and they would love it because they just associate him as being a winner because he's won multiple World Series. I don't think he would ever do it because why would you leave being an owner of a team?
He wants to be an owner, yeah.
Yeah, and he's already a partial owner of Boston. So why would he do it? He wouldn't. But I think people would love it because he's a proven winner. Just like if Dombrowski became available, people would love it if Dombrowski came here. Or what's his name? Preller from San Diego.
You think people would like Preller? I don't think they would. I think they would look at what he's done in San Diego and be like, that guy can't build a team. And I would be saying that.
That's fair.
He's fun.
I think people would like it because it is fun. Because it is people don't make trades in April, and Preller's like, take this, we're getting Luis Ariz. People in St. Louis would love that. Instead, Mo, you got to hear, be patient. We're going to wait till the deadline. Like, Preller, I don't know what the hell would happen. Like, they could lose. It could be a disaster, but it would be fun.
Somebody said, just go get somebody from Tampa. Yeah, that's Chaim Bloom. Coming up next, Doug Gottlieb, clearly trying to make a publicity stunt. We'll tell you about it next year on 101 ESPN. T-Bone, we know what it's like to prepare for a radio show on a day-to-day basis. It's not the hardest thing in the world. We're not out here digging ditches, but it does require preparation. And so when I saw the news yesterday that Doug Gottlieb he's more infamous than famous, I would say. When he was in college at Notre Dame, he was kicked out of Notre Dame because he had a credit card scandal, and then he goes to Oklahoma State and is like a pretty decent player for them and wears his shorts backwards, and that's mostly what he's known for from his college career. That guy, who then went on to Fox Sports and hosted a national radio show, he has now been named the head coach of a Division I basketball program. Here's what it sounded like yesterday, yes, as he announced this on his radio program.
Sources tell me that the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay is hiring Doug Gottlieb to be the school's new men's basketball coach.
I can confirm that report. I'm the new head coach at Wisconsin-Green Bay.
That deserves round for applause.
Thanks, man. There's a side note. The Doug Gottlieb show will continue on as we've come to an agreement that this is what we're going to do. If no one's laughing at your dreams, might not be dreaming big enough. And I'm the new head coach at Wisconsin Green Bay, and I ain't going anywhere with this radio show.
Nobody clapped for the radio show being around still?
Can you imagine, like, Dan Hurley announcing, he's like, hey, I'm going to be hosting a national radio show while still maintaining my role as the head coach at the University of Connecticut. People would be like, what? I understand that there are some players now that, like, especially in the NBA, that are hosting podcasts. Draymond Green has his own, but Jeff Teague has his own. There's a bunch of players across the league that are now they're hosting podcasts. Hell, you look at, I think it was announced yesterday, Bleacher Report. Micah Parsons is now like the head of content for the football side for Bleacher Report. He's going to be doing a bunch of stuff for them. Cool, fair, no problem. Hosting a national radio show every single day of the week while trying to recruit, while trying to coach your team. Good luck, dude. He's going to be like planning meetings for his team around the 3 hours in which he is on the radio for Fox Sports. I have no idea how this is going to work. I think it's going to be an absolute catastrophe for Green Bay. Thank God it's not at, like, Oklahoma State or something where he's going back to his alma mater and trying to maintain this radio show.
I think it'd be better if it was that.
This is going to be a disaster. God bless him. Good luck to Doug Gottlieb. I suppose I hope he does well. I don't like Doug Gottlieb. Never mind. I'm being a total fraud right now. I don't think he's good at his job. I think he's really bad at this, and I hope he fails and crashes and burns spectacularly at Green Bay.
Wow.
That's the honest answer.
Wow. Boy, I
think this is all a publicity stunt, and I feel bad for Green Bay that they're being used like this. Like, if I'm a fan of Green Bay today, I'm furious. Absolutely furious.
I get that, but I think it's interesting to where when you're a small school like this, why not just try it? Just see if it works.
Because it's gonna fail.
We don't know that. You can't.
I do. I'm very confident.
You are always saying not to be pre-mad, and you are pre-mad about Green Bay freaking basketball of all things. Hiring a radio host. Come on, it's Green Bay. Like I don't mind them trying this. I think it is going to crash and burn spectacularly. Like, I totally agree with you. Like, I'm picturing, like, when we go to commercial break, we sit here and talk. I picture him, like, recruiting somebody. Like, they walk into the studio and he gives his recruiting pitch in 3 minutes and then goes back on air. But I'm fascinated by it because when you're a small school, a small college basketball school like that, why not try something that's kind of unheard of? Go hire a former basketball player. Go hire a guy that is doing a radio show that you think could potentially be a good recruiter. Like, I don't mind it. I do think it is going to fail, but I am not as angry as you are about the hire of Doug Gottlieb.
I think he's just a horrible radio host, a bad person, a total fraud, and I think he's going to be horrible at the University of Green Bay. The Phoenix men's basketball program. They got hoodwinked.
I hope they make the tournament.
A total con artist. All right, Doug Gottlieb, the next head basketball coach of the University of Green Bay, and still maintaining his terrible radio show on Fox Sports.
You were just going to go after him like this, I would have never approved this segment.
I don't understand this. This is nonsense. It's total. He's trying to do what Deion Sanders did at the University of Colorado. That's what he's trying to do here. It's Doug Gottlieb, dude. You're not Deion. Come on. All right, coming up next, Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues here on 101 ESPN.
Hey, I got a question for you. Chris Kerber here, and here's the question. Why do people wait to get machines around their house checked out and then gripe when they break down? It's a great question. Well, if you think about your HVAC unit, if you think about what's about to come during the summertime and the air conditioning unit, now's the time to get Classic Air Care over to your house to check the unit out. Now, it's not going to make sure that something doesn't break later, but you're going to know if your unit is in good shape, that it's cleaned, that it's ready to go. And then if something unfortunate happens, it does happen, and you know that Classic Air Care is going to be right there to get back into the house and make sure that your house is comfortable for you to live in. Take care of that air conditioning unit and get it serviced and get it ready to go for the summer before something happens in the middle of the summer and you start to melt in your own house. And Classic Air Care can do it. They've got all the services from cleaning to fixing, whatever you may need. You're hearing a weird sound, get them over there to check it out before something major breaks on it. You can book an appointment online at classicaircare.com, and air is A-I-R-E. classicaircare.com. You can call them, check out their Google rating, a 4.8 Google rating. Find out how happy other customers have been when they've had them into their house. It's Classic Air Care. Again, book online at classicaircare.com. They've been making people comfortable since 1926.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals last night held on to win 7-6 over the Angels after blowing a 5-0 lead. They've won 3 games in a row. They'll look for 4 tonight as they are in LA to take on the Angels and close out that series. It'll be Lance Lynn on the mound for the Cardinals going up against Griffin Canning for the Angels. 8:07 first pitch tonight between the Cardinals and the Angels. And then tonight here on 101 ESPN, we'll have some NHL playoff action for you as the Dallas Stars can eliminate the Colorado Avalanche in 5 if they win tonight. Pregame at 6:30 right here on right here on 101 ESPN. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports and Update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex Ferrario out today. He'll be back in tomorrow and then out again on Friday. He's got a family trip. He's going to play a bunch of golf this weekend. Good for him, but he's out today. We go out right now to the 101 ESPN hotline to be joined by Chris Kerber. He's the voice of the Blues. He joins us weekly here on BK and Ferrario. Kerbs, appreciate the time as always, man. How you doing today?
BK, Cardinals have won a few games in a row.
That's right.
City's playing tonight. We got the American Parkinson's Disease Association golf outing at Top Golf tomorrow. Brett Goldstein is in town to perform at the Fox on Friday. Red Sox, I'm thinking it's a pretty good sports week and things are good.
All right. That's what I like to hear, Curbs. Let's start with the hockey that we saw last night. You got a couple of series that are kind of coming down to the wire right now. I wanted to ask you about Bruins versus Panthers because Grant brought this up earlier today to us in the office. I want to get your perspective on it. It feels like every night there's a new goalie interference controversy that takes place in the NHL, especially during the playoffs. Is there anything in your mind that can be done by the league to make this less controversial so we get fewer of these that go 50-50 in your mind?
Yep, got it. Absolutely. It's a great topic right now. And I think the graphic on ESPN last night during the game was that I think there's been 5 goalie interference challenges in the playoffs so far this playoff season, and 1 has been successful. If you're talking about a coach's challenge being successful just 20% of the time, you're talking the fact that coaches and then obviously the players don't have a clue what the rule is. And to me, that just means that the National Hockey League is going to have to get together. Their competition, the general managers and the hockey ops department are going to have to get there and really dig into this rule like they've never dug into it before. And if you go back real quick, when the replay, first off, the biggest issue to me, BK, is that when the National Hockey League took on instant replay, they did rewrite a couple of rules for some of the clarity of frame-to-frame replay. Things get real specific when you look and you stop video, don't they? Right? And so they've had to adjust. Well, there was a Blues game in Boston where Jake Allen gets bumped out of the play. And at that point in time, goalie interference was left to the referees on the ice. Now, you think of all the different number of referees in the game. You think of all the different interpretations of a play and how it can look and what they perceive, right? The reason that the goal against the Blues, and I believe it was a game-winning goal in the end, was allowed was they said that they didn't feel that Jake Allen would have been able to get over to save the puck anyway. Well, that's not – there's nothing in the rule that says that. So after Doug Armstrong lost his mind on that one, the general managers got together that offseason. They took goalie interference away from the referees and took it into the war room in Toronto. That had only 5 or 6 guys kind of looking at this night in, night out, and they were really able to move the guardrails in on what is goalie interference. The problem is there's still too much inconsistency. There's nothing in the rule book. If you go back to that Boston game where it was the Boston defenseman that gets kind of shoved into his goaltender, right? There's nothing in the rule book that says you can review that play. So you've got to then interpret the rule in a certain way to determine whether or not there was goalie interference. And you can interpret that, yes, there was. But that's just not the way the rule is written. So to me, they've got to get on it and really redefine, pull in some goaltenders. So, put the rule in place where the players, coaches, broadcasters can really get a much better sense of what that penalty is and what it isn't, because it's the one that, again, when only 20% or even less than that are successfully called or reviewed. I mean, notice how few offside reviews are go against the review, right? It's a problem the league is going to have to address, and you've got to be real sure of yourself if you're a coach that's going to challenge goalie interference right now.
Curbs, as we're talking about the playoffs, we talked about this earlier in the show today, and The Athletic did a great job. They released a piece, and it had, what do the non-playoff teams have in terms of what is needed on the checklist to go on a Stanley Cup run. And one category they have elite center, elite winger, elite defenseman, elite goalie. They said Binnington was an elite goalie this season. Their projections say he's not for next season. I just disagree with that one. They project that Pavel Buchnevich will fall into the elite winger category next season. Do you feel like the St. Louis Blues, whether it be Pavel Buchnevich or someone in the system, have an elite winger that can be ready to take that step for them as they start to enter this retool, or is that something they're going to have to address before they can get out of it?
I believe the Blues absolutely have an elite goaltender in Binnington. I believe they have an elite centerman in Robert Thomas. Do they have an elite winger? The question, Tanner, and it's a good one, is how do you define elite? I talked to Pavel Buchnevich at the end of the season, and he was really down on himself with his production. And he said at times he felt like maybe he was putting too much pressure on himself, and then the struggles went even more downhill. Can he be? Yeah, I believe that Pavel Buchnevich is a 75 to 85-point player and can play and maybe be the best two-way winger on the St. Louis Blues roster? Absolutely. Is he right now, in my opinion, the best two-way winger on the St. Louis Blues roster? Absolutely. Is he elite? I don't know. And I'm not. And Jordan Kyrou, I think, has the skill to be elite, but I don't think he has the whole game at the moment. To me, that elite winger is somebody like and maybe this is too harsh of a comparison, but to me, Mikko Rantanen is an elite winger. Alex Ovechkin, again, raising the bar even more in his heyday, an elite winger. I get it. But to me,
do you think Mitch Marner's an elite winger, Kerbs?
What's that?
Would you have Mitch Marner on that category of an elite level winger?
I'd say he's getting close. I think sometimes the consistency has to be there. See, to me, elite's got to be consistent, right? All the way through. That's just someone that you're constantly feared. So yeah, I'd have him edging into that category. Absolutely.
The reason I ask is just because, like, he's in that category of really good defensive player, consistently in conversations for, like, Selke Trophy, and some of that's probably the market in which he plays. I get all of that. But he put up 85 points this year, and that's been kind of consistent for him. And I think if you're talking about Pavel Buchnevich becoming and quote-unquote elite-level winger, it's probably in the vein of a Mitch Marner, who's putting up 25 to 35 goals per year and getting into that 80 to 85-point threshold with really good defensive play. It probably looks similar to that as opposed to a guy like, Matthew Tkachuk, who's elite, but it looks a lot different than it would if you get Pavel Buchnevich into that category.
Well, and to your point, what you'll notice is, for example, is if I said, well, how would you define an elite defenseman? Someone's going to easily point to Cale Makar,
sure,
right? And then I might say a player like Colton Parayko is an elite defenseman, but he plays a very different kind of game than Cale Makar, right? In this case, you're talking about the way Matthew Tkachuk plays a wing versus Mitch Marner, and even in a slightly different way. And I think that Pavel Buchnevich is far more well-rounded on a 200-foot game than even Mitch Marner is. Because he's just more conscientious on the other side. I think the hockey IQ of Pavel Buchnevich is fantastic, and I think he's a critical key piece to this hockey team moving forward. But and that's why if you're gonna, that's what makes this game so amazing to me, Brandon. Is just the pieces all have to come together and fit like a glove, right? And that's why two star players sometimes don't necessarily gel on the ice perfectly well, but can be great on a team together. Because, if you've got Pavel Buchnevich that can really go into the corners and dig the puck out and then still make great plays on a line with Robert Thomas, right? You saw the difference on that line with Jake Neighbors, who would then go to the front of the net and had that extra little bit of grit to get to the areas and score goals there to round out that line versus a Jordan Kyrou who would stay on the outside and maybe not get to those areas quite as much, and that consistency there. And that's why you're a little careful with how you define elite, but great and good enough, yeah. And Pavel Buchnevich, to the original question, is to me, whether you define him as could be elite or not quite there, is still a critical piece to this team.
Kerbs, speaking of that, it just jogged my mind here. What do you think is something that could, if they could accomplish it, and it's a big if they could accomplish it this offseason, could accelerate the retool faster, whether it is finding an elite winger or finding, whether you want to call it elite defenseman or a number one defenseman to pair with Colton Parayko?
And which one's more likely?
Yeah.
I have not bugged the room or the house of the general manager yet, so I haven't listened in. But I would think. Okay, let's start with this. Are we going to define it as say getting back into the playoffs? Is that where we would define it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, because you got to get there to have yourself a chance. So let's say one, special teams. Absolutely, special teams is going to have to be better. You've got a good enough goaltender. You've got good enough players. that if your combined percentage of special teams gets back even closer to 100 to 102, and you really want it to be more like 105 is the way they look at those numbers. But if you can get that even closer to 100, you're going to see a lot different offensive numbers from guys. You're going to see pressure on the other teams because they don't want to take penalties against you because you can beat them on the power play, and you can be more aggressive because your penalty kill is good. The special teams this year for the St. Louis Blues were not good. It starts there in my book. I do think that they will get there at the beginning of the season to pick up where they left off with the consistency of the coach of Drew Bannister. Okay. I also think that, and this is going to be key, could they go out there and make a move and get a free agent? Absolutely. Are they going to do it? I don't believe they're going to do it. They're going to see if Dvorsky can make the playoffs. Or I'm sorry, if Dvorsky can make this team. Okay. And then what does that look like in the skill? And for the St. Louis Blues to take that next step, higher-end skill is going to have to find their way, whether it be through a Dvorsky or something, into that top six that forces it. I still believe with the St. Louis Blues, and I know he had 26 goals, which was the second most goal total of his career, right? But I believe that Brandon Saad, if the Blues are going to make the playoffs, you've got to put a lineup where a guy like Brandon Saad is consistently on your third line, because you've got to have that kind of depth these days, and then plays up the lineup when an injury or something is needed. And if somehow you find another centerman to take over that second spot, and that puts Braden Shen and his still very good ability on the third line spot, now you're talking about the depth you need there. And to me, that's where it's going to be. I think a guy, and I'm going to keep an eye on, and again, guys, I have not talked to anybody, so I'm really throwing a noodle at the wall to have some fun with here.
Please.
To me, a guy like a William Carrier as a free agent becomes a real intriguing guy to bring in. And you're going, well, that's not top six. I know that's bottom six, but it adds some championship caliber again to you. It adds some grit to you, adds some scoring touch to you, and just help rounds out that bottom side while you're trying to figure out the top six, because they're not going to go out and spend the money on the top six. They've already pretty much stated that. So in that sense, to me, it's there, and I don't know what their abilities are yet to really fix the defensive side of things at the moment, because to do so, you got to clear out some contracts, and that's proving to be quite difficult for them.
Hey, Curbs, appreciate the time as always, man. Great to be able to catch up with the voice of the Blues here each and every Wednesday on BK and Ferrario. We'll talk with you again next week, my friend.
All right, good stuff, fellas. Have an awesome week.
You got it. It's Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joining us as he does each and every Wednesday here on BK and Ferrario. We will give you a chance to win a pair of tickets for First Beer Friday, the Cardinals game against the Red Sox. That's coming up next, and we'll hit the BK and Ferrario Rewind here on 101 ESPN.
Run it back with a daily rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Loom, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
Alongside Tanner and Grant on BK. Great job by Grant Francis filling in today. Alex Ferrario will be back in tomorrow, and then he'll be out again on Friday. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Right now is your chance to win a pair of tickets for First Beer Friday. Cardinals versus the Red Sox on Friday night at Busch Stadium. First Beer Friday tickets start at just $15. They will include your first cold beer on the house, or you can just text in right now at 314-399-9646. If you are texter number 101 to the correct answer to this question, you are getting that pair of tickets to First Beer Friday. The question is, who is the radio host that is now taking over as a college basketball coach and will ultimately fail at said job because he's trying to keep his radio job and the basketball job? If you have the answer to that question, your texter number 101, you're getting the pair of tickets to First Beer Friday, Cardinals versus the Red Sox. To finish out the show today, T-Bone, the Cardinals have indeed won 3 games in a row. The offense has been better lately. It's not great, but it's been better. If you look at them overall, they're batting .265 over their last 7 or 8 games, basically dating back to the start of that Mets series. Now, many of those were losses, but the offense has been a little better. They're going for the sweep tonight. You got Lance Lynn on the mound. This is a must-win game, in my opinion. This Angels team's terrible. Do you think that they get it done?
I do. Watching the Angels, they are genuinely the bad news bears, and I think the worst team in baseball currently with their roster. So I think Lynn gives you a competitive outing. The offense can score like 5 runs against this pitching staff, so I think they get it done and they get the much-needed sweep and come home.
You got Griffin Canning on the mound for the LA Angels. He's not very good. He's the most average of average starters that you could possibly go up against if you're just looking at like strikeout rate, everything else involved. He's just not a very good pitcher. So you should win tonight. I think they will get it done. I think they win this like 7-5. I think you'll give up a decent number of runs, but you find a way to get it done in the end. Alec Burleson, I think, is going to have another good night tonight. I think Nolan Gorman's going to hit a home run tonight in LA. That would be my pick to be able to get a homer tonight off of a right-handed starter.
Not going to go with that. I'm going to go with a Newt Bar bomb.
Newt Bar.
Yeah.
I like that. For Tanner and Grant, I'm BK. We will talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane's coming up next from 2 to 6 right here on 101 ESPN.